What usually happens at this stage is very predictable. Humans would choose superpowers or receive magical abilities to fight monsters. This is the standard narrative. Our protagonist thinks this as he stares at his phone screen, which shows exactly what he just described. At that moment, a strong light begins to emanate from the screen. He also thought the same would happen to him. The only problem is that, out of the entire world, he was the only one chosen, and there is a massive horde of monsters that needs to be destroyed. As if the overload of work in normal life weren't enough, now he also has to be the sole worker. To understand how things reached this point, we need to go back to the past. Baion's a completely average person, literally your everyday citizen, just another Joe with no remarkable qualities. Since his self-esteem isn't very high, it's more accurate to describe him as a total loser. Being a completely average person, he liked to spend his free time reading webtoons. The series he follows weekly is very good, and Baion also keeps up with the latest releases in this area. He always makes sure to leave his opinion when the works are good. At this moment, he's fully engaged doing exactly that. And he ended up bumping into a classmate because he wasn't looking ahead. His first instinct was to apologize for what happened, but the girl scolded him, saying he should look ahead while walking. Funny thing is, she's holding a phone too, as if he was the only one distracted. With a disdainful look in her eyes, she glares at our protagonist with disgust, then continues on her way without a second glance. Unfortunately, this poor guy is completely in love with her. In his head, he's practically her boyfriend. She just doesn't know it yet, until his distraction is suddenly interrupted by a slap to the head from a guy who was bothered by our protagonist's expression. And although that's wrong, you can't exactly blame the guy. The expression was awful. The brute ordered him to stop looking at the girl like that. This is your typical rich jerk, and to top it all off, our protagonist's father works for his father. The boy ended up apologizing, realizing that the villains in the stories he usually reads are way worse. That's when a horrifying, nightmarish creature appeared in the hallway, something completely surreal. Even without knowing its origin, just looking into its eyes made one thing clear. If 100 men can't beat a gorilla, imagine trying to fight this demon. Trying to make sense of the situation, our boy felt something trickling down into his underwear. That creature looked like it came straight out of a fantasy story, and the strangest part is, this excited the boy, since such monsters are usually used to showcase the protagonist's power. This guy has serious issues. Seriously. He's actually expecting a support character to show up and help him. If it were me, I'd have already broken the 100-meter sprint record. And that's it. The boy's sanity was obliterated. He now believes he'll even receive a magical female companion to save him, at least in S-Rank 1. Near him lies the body of the rich jerk, collapsed on the floor, the first to receive a tender session from the creature. That's when the protagonist realized what might be happening. An opportunity to reveal his protagonistism and save the one who tormented him at school. The creature tried to attack the student, but he managed to dodge the blow. Meanwhile, our protagonist is still overthinking the situation, unsure of how to intervene. That's when a system window appeared for him, informing him that he had been chosen. Everything was falling into place. A status window was exactly what he needed right now. Meanwhile, the rich kid keeps begging for help, and our protagonist replies that he'll save him soon, right after awakening his powers. The system said he would train for the next 6,666 years in another dimension, and if he reached the end of the tower, he would gain divine powers and become humanity's savior. But the boy doesn't want to waste time reading all of that. He wants to receive the benefits immediately. Meanwhile, the rich kid does his best to survive. Rephrasing the message, the system asked if he wants to climb the tower for the next 66,666 years to become super strong, and the boy immediately agreed. If he accepts, he must choose a skill to use. While our protagonist wastes time reading all this, the rich kid is nearly becoming that creature's snack. The system said he could choose any skill he desired, which left the boy extremely indecisive. Confirming the boy's suspicions, the system said he could choose a power to save another world. He could become a decanter and lead his own army, or wield the most powerful mystical item of all. As long as he can imagine it, it will be completely possible. But the Tower of Trials is not something simple to conquer. It has over 60,000 floors, and the boy has 1 year to clear it. Either he reaches the end, or he dies trying. After absorbing all this information, he began to think even more. Now he's unsure whether he should choose a skill or an item. At this point, the rich kid started reminding him that he had promised to help soon, but our protagonist asked him to be a little more patient, because he had finally reached a conclusion, and he tapped a button on the system screen with his finger. It was time to tell the system which ability he had chosen. There's a lot of suspense in our protagonist's eyes as he prepares to reveal something surprising. He asked for a ticket that would transport him directly to the final floor of the Tower of Trials. Something so unexpected and bizarre, yet at the same time so brilliantly clever that even the creature stopped doing what it most desired. Not just the monster, the system itself also became confused by it, and the boy recalled the system's own rules, stating that he could choose either an item or a skill. Worried about the consequences, the system said that bending the rules is one thing, but this was completely breaking them. But faced with that explanation, the boy became even more upset, claiming the system was just deceiving people. Since there was no way around it, the system decided to hand over the ticket to the protagonist. And it really worked. The system stated that upon being transported to the final floor, he would receive all the rewards that come with it. It then asked if he wanted to use the item now, something our protagonist confirmed immediately. And that small piece of paper began to glow brighter and brighter. A light so intense that it completely distracted both the rich kid and the creature that wanted to devour him moments ago. The boy's body was now enveloped in mysterious glow. A glow so powerful it seemed as though the entire school building was shining as well. For a brief moment, Earth became the brightest place in the galaxy, like a star. Looking at his empty hands, our protagonist wondered if it had really worked. Until the system began congratulating him for reaching the end of the Tower of Trials, it was time for him to receive his reward. Our boy received superpowers and SSS-level abilities. He had surpassed the limits of humanity. Several notifications appeared around him. Everything that could be maxed out was now at its highest tier. And the boy's body returned to the school, glowing even more intensely. A massive transformation had taken place in the blink of an eye. He was no longer a loser. Energy radiated from the boy's body, and that dangerous creature realized the tables had turned. The rich kid was also stunned, noticing how drastically the boy's appearance had improved. Seeing the creature hesitate, our protagonist asked if it was just going to stand there watching, because it was time for it to come at him. The poor monster remained deeply worried. It looked at the rich kid for comfort, but he just pointed at our protagonist. That's when the creature realized that in the grand scheme of things, it still had to fulfill its vile purpose. It charged toward our protagonist, fully convinced that nothing would happen. To the boy, everything felt like it was moving far too slowly. He decided to make the most of his first combat opportunity, choosing to finish off the creature with a single flick of his fingers, which he immediately did, causing another burst of intense light in that hallway, as if atoms were undergoing nuclear fission. A completely overwhelming power was now at his fingertips, and something utterly destructive was happening inside that school. The resulting energy was completely annihilative. It didn't remain confined to Earth's atmosphere. It found its way into the vastness of space. A beam of energy so powerful it could obliterate anything in its path. We finally understand what happened on Earth, the trail of destruction left behind by that power and the poor creature that no longer exists. All that raw power went far beyond what our protagonist had originally intended. That's when the system appeared again. It's time to calculate the rewards. Due to his exceptional stats, he broke multiple records, earning even greater rewards. He never imagined that asking for a ticket like that would lead to all this. The system reported that the total casualties caused by the attack amounted to 2 billion lives. The rich kid was still there, realizing that the monster that had been annihilated was just an ant in the presence of the true monster. Trying to pull himself together, he asked what had just happened, and our boy replied that he was being way too formal. Until he decided to focus and use a powerful magic he had learned from all of this. An SSS level time regression ability was being activated. Our boy was doing this to return things to their original state, with the intent of reversing the damage caused by his powerful attack. The energy he had released was gradually returning. Not just the energy, the gears of reality itself began to turn in reverse. Back to the moment when the boy decided to launch that attack with the tip of his fingers. He was almost at the starting point, until finally his ability managed to send him to the desired moment, where he was standing face to face with that threatening creature. That's when he realized that, dangerous as it was, the monster was deeply terrified. Placing his hands on his head, our boy was relieved that it had worked and apologized for scaring the creature. It was his first time with so much power. As he reflected on the extent of everything he had received, the poor creature tried to quietly escape through the hole in the wall. That's when our protagonist asked where it was going using an imprisonment ability. The thought of killing the creature twice made him feel bad, so the boy needed to think of something else. Taking the opportunity, our protagonist asked if the rich kid hadn't told him to go buy some bread. The jerk instantly changed his mind, saying he'd go buy it himself, and began apologizing for everything he had done. But our protagonist remained quite menacing, telling the boy to wait a moment as there was still something to be done. Outside, several creatures were destroying the city, and the rich kid realized how terrifying the situation in the city truly was. The fear he felt upon seeing all that was genuine and crawling to the protagonist's feet. He started begging for help, but our boy was busy and told him to wait a bit, and the rich kid said saving everyone at the school was more important. Only then did our boy say that saving his family was more important than other lives. That's a completely reasonable stance, and the rich kid understood that perfectly. Our boy was using an A-rank transportation ability, disappearing from inside the school in the blink of an eye. A man was lying on a very comfortable bed. The perfect nap, taken just after lunch. A sleep so deep that not even the end of the world could wake him. That's what our protagonist's parents were watching on television. His mother was impressed by how clean a single man's room could be, while his father wished he could star in that scene. On break, peacefully sleeping. That's when the program was interrupted by an emergency broadcast. Korea's capital was being attacked by monsters, and citizens were advised to stay alert. This left the couple horrified, and the phone resting on the table began to ring. Deciding to check what was going on, the couple went to the window and realized the news was true. The world was being destroyed by terrifying creatures. The sight filled them with dread. Such a scenario should have been impossible even to imagine. And by revealing themselves, they ended up drawing the attention of one of the monsters, which then focused all its aggression on them. The entire apartment was about to be destroyed in a single blow from the creature. That's when our protagonist appeared behind the monster, asking what it was doing. Using a gravity inversion ability, our protagonist was ready to teach that creature a lesson. To activate the magic, he needed to select a target object. Before the monster could understand what was happening, its body began to levitate, ascending into the sky as if fallen, only in reverse. Now our protagonist's parents were completely safe. The problem was, they hadn't expected to see their son levitating in the air. Passing through the window as if it were made of nothing, he confirmed that he really was their son. But the couple's disbelief was still immense. Too much was happening at once. That's when his father asked why he wasn't at school, and also shouldn't he know better than to walk into the house with shoes on. And our boy replied that none of that mattered right now, but his parents disagreed. Just because the world was in chaos didn't mean he shouldn't go to school or respect the house rules. So taking off the shoes he was wearing, he acknowledged that his parents must have worked very hard to raise him for the past 16 years. After all, he never let go of his phone, not even for a moment, and he knew that worried his parents. And now they no longer need to worry about anything because he had been chosen as the savior of humanity. That whole speech only made his parents even more worried, realizing that reading all that nonsense had melted the boy's brain. Our protagonist revealed that he had always thought about this. The protagonists and the stories he followed always managed to handle multiple things at once, and he deeply admired that kind of attitude. But there was one thing that always made him think. Those stories always started the same way. The protagonist had some kind of revelation. Sometimes he returned in time. There was always a common motivation, a knowledge revealed from the future, a well-drawn best friend to make life more cheerful. Those protagonists never thought about the families they had. That's something our boy will never overlook, blessing his parents with several abilities. Even after all that speech, the boy's father is old school, asking once more what kind of madness he's talking about. So our protagonist, protecting the family he has, comes before everything else. Using a massive area spell to protect that whole region. An absolute and impenetrable defense. That should be more than enough to guarantee their safety. The monsters won't be able to lay a single finger on his parents. Finally, the boy could dedicate himself to saving the rest of the world, but his parents insisted on asking one more time what the hell he was doing. Saying goodbye to them, he said he loved them very much. And a great light appeared in that room once again. For now, they had no answer. They said they loved the boy very much too. Outside the school building, some things were destroyed. Our protagonist had returned to where he was, and the rich kid, showing extreme servitude, asked if the boy's parents were alright, and our protagonist said yes. That left his former tormentor quite relieved. Now they could return to the topic of the bread because our protagonist hadn't forgotten about it, and he ended up apologizing for bringing it up again. It's just stronger than him. As a former victim of that kind of treatment, it was time for our protagonist to teach that jerk a lesson. Using a massive spell, he was ready to perform a great summoning, leaving the poor guy terrified. With a cold and psychotic look on his face, he asked the rich kid if he really liked hamburger buns, because now he was going to eat them until he was completely stuffed. So many hamburgers appeared in that place that the poor bully ended up buried. He could barely escape the mountain of hamburgers that had been summoned. After they were all conjured, the bully managed to get up, but our protagonist remained deep in thought. He realized that the guy was extremely weak, which negatively surprised him. He had been expecting a bit more. The rich kid started feeling intimidated by that judgment and asked if things really had to go this far since he had never done anything that bad to him. Our protagonist realized he still hadn't shown enough, leaving the rich kid even more terrified. It was time to show him a little flashback, which left the bully very surprised. Since he didn't know what he had done that was so wrong, it was time to remember everything that had happened. Because our protagonist remembered it all, even being laughed at mockingly by that despicable creature. Or the time he burned his entire school uniform. There was even a day when our boy had to eat his lunch after being dumped in a toilet. Every single day he was consumed by a massive sense of powerlessness. Once his glasses were locked with a padlock, and apparently that bully didn't remember any of it. He admitted to having told the boy to buy bread, but couldn't recall the rest of those stories, especially since our protagonist didn't even wear glasses now. Even more threatening, the boy asked if the bully was saying he lied, but against all expectations, the bully stuck to his word. That was enough for our boy. He would accept those apologies, and as a gesture of the good relationship they'd have going forward, he transformed the guy into something he desired. The first possibility the bully considered was to have a body sculpted by pure juice. That was more than enough for our protagonist to use his transformation ability. A greeny mist engulfed the boy's body, and a transformation took place. The mist finally dissipated, but there was no muscular body there. To the bully's surprise, he had been turned into a hamburger. He was absolutely outraged, while our protagonist laughed at the scene. He said that if the guy regretted what he had done, he could turn him back to normal, leaving the little hamburger terrified. But their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a female voice. It was that girl who had looked at our protagonist as if he were garbage. It didn't take long for him to realize who had arrived. He told her he had been chosen by the gods, while the little hamburger kept begging to be returned to his original form. The girl was terrified when she realized the hamburger was talking. Our protagonist said it was very cute and offered her a bite. Only then did she place her hand on her chest as if breathless, asking if our protagonist wasn't scared. Because the entire world had changed drastically. Many people must have died. And for some unknown reason, there was no one at school, and all communication had stopped. She couldn't call the police. Not knowing what was going on made her terrified, and she couldn't understand how our protagonist could be so cheerful. She said this with tears in her eyes. That triggered a strong reaction in our protagonist. He asked if she really didn't have the habit of reading any kind of story. He said they were really fun, and the reason no one else was there was because the author of this story was lazy and didn't want to draw more characters. And honestly, he had a point. But the girl asked what he was talking about. For our protagonist, This was problematic. He realized she lacked a sense of romance. That only left the girl even more confused. Placing her hands on her head, our protagonist began lamenting deeply. A human sandwich suggested that he return things to normal, while our boy considered bringing in another woman to fill the role of female lead. He decided to do just that, searching through all dimensions using an SSS-level summoning ability. That would bring him the most suitable female character for that role. A huge magical circle appeared on the floor of that place. This left the girl absolutely terrified as she had no idea what was happening. Our protagonist asked for the most beautiful and charming woman in all dimensions. The brilliance of his magic was so intense that it even blinded the eyes of the creatures out on the street. After the ability was used, a thick mist formed in the hallway. Returning to his usual self, the human hamburger asked what that pervert had just done. Our protagonist began to sweat cold. There was indeed a woman in front of his eyes. In one of her hands, she held a blood-stained blade. Even though her face was beautiful, her gaze was threatening. Now a completely unfamiliar girl had appeared in that school, and she looked like she had just escaped from a dangerous situation. Our protagonist was stunned, and the human hamburger completely smitten. That girl didn't know what had happened, but she was sure she had just stabbed Jeremy with her own hands. She seemed like the standard character from a romance where the heroine seduces a tyrant, a villain, and becomes the villain in his place. That guy had a lot of nerve. The first time he saw her, he treated her with total casualness. It was the first time that it ever happened to her, since she was the heir to House Libertion. But our protagonist immediately cut off her explanation. She didn't have permission to switch the genre of the story like that. So he asked if Layla understood how important the first 3 chapters of a webtoon are. And just for reference, we had just entered chapter 3. If she insisted on explaining her backstory now, they'd be stuck in that school hallway for several episodes, and the readers would think the pace of the story was way too slow. The girl ignored that and continued explaining where she came from, but our protagonist was annoyed. She was giving way too much background about something irrelevant, until she said that the boy was poorly raised for raising his voice at her even though they didn't know each other. Our boy isn't exactly an avid reader of fantasy romance, and the silver-haired girl wanted to know where she was and why the other girl was wearing such strange clothes. Because just moments ago she was certain she had been lovingly stabbing her husband with that dagger. With a simple wave of his fingers, our protagonist made the bloody weapon disappear. He said he would do the same for her clothes too, making the new female character look completely flawless. That was simply unexplainable, said both the other girl and the human sandwich. Then once again, the silver-haired girl asked who our protagonist was, but at that moment, he completely ignored her because he sensed something approaching. Using his newly acquired power, he created a protective barrier, preventing a powerful attack from destroying the school. While they had been distracted arguing, a creature as large as the building had approached dangerously, leaving those inside completely terrified. The silver-haired girl was confused. She didn't even know what world this was. Inside the barrier, our protagonist watched as the monster unleashed a series of attacks, which only made its fury grow more and more. It didn't take long for our protagonist to realize that the creature was incredibly stupid, with a high chance of being mentally challenged. This was the perfect opportunity for him to warm up. With the system's help, he was better controlling his strength to avoid another disaster. Using one of his many abilities, he prepared an electric sting to finish off the creature, revealing to it that the power he possessed was many times greater than anything that existed in that land. After that brutal demonstration of power, the girl squad was impressed. After all, it was truly amazing, and at the same time, completely unbelievable. Our protagonist didn't think the situation was anything special. As long as he was having fun, nothing else mattered. This time, he used ice magic to attack the creatures, which left the girl squad even more terrified. A low-level spell was enough to completely freeze all those monsters. Now that the creatures were paralyzed, he had the chance to step on them as if they were insects. The impact of his stonk shattered those blocks of ice completely, scattering pieces of the creatures all over the city. After this brief interaction, he managed to eradicate the monsters near the school. Realizing that he might have gotten a bit carried away in the process, he had to significantly limit his power. Even so, the result was devastating. Knowing he had become extremely powerful genuinely made our protagonist happy. That's when the system notified him for having defeated his first enemy. As soon as the system screen vanished, several other monsters appeared at his location. That was perfect for him, a fusion of a fantasy world and a world of awakened hunters. One of the abilities he possessed was flight, which he now used to fight the monsters. He was also capable of materializing a blade made of psionic energy. Passing through the monsters like they were nothing, our protagonist easily sliced through them, leaving behind a huge trail of bodies and monster parts flying through the air. He did all of this while heading toward the largest one, a dangerous, brutal dragon. But even that creature was weak compared to the power he held. He finally realized the monsters were emerging from a single portal, and he needed to do something about it. At first glance, the simplest way to solve the situation was to pass through the portal and clear the dungeon. But our boy was full of absurd abilities. One of them was dimensional banishment. He didn't need to go to the trouble of actually doing the work. The creatures quickly realized what he was capable of. The fear they began to feel was so intense that they stopped advancing. But there was nothing they could do anymore. The banishment ability was already underway. In this way, our protagonist would eliminate the portal's existence itself, while sending it into an even larger portal. A massive void appeared in the sky where the dimensional rift had been. Sighing in relief, he realized that this would keep the city safe for a while. Having resolved everything outside, he used teleportation to return to the school. As soon as he came back into the hallway, he saw the two girls chatting calmly with the human hamburger. The silver-haired girl noticed his return and said that while our protagonist was outside, she had been talking to the others to learn about this world, realizing that somehow she had traveled through time into the future. There were indeed many differences between her reality and this one. Our protagonist explained that she hadn't exactly time traveled, but he would help her adjust to this new world using his transformation ability. The goal was to change her clothes, to make the illustrator's job easier, since he had already suffered enough drawing those short-lived fight scenes. As the glow enveloped the silver-haired girl's body, she was quite impressed. Her body revealed such beauty that the human hamburger completely lost control. The girl was genuinely embarrassed. The outfit was far too revealing. She asked for a dress or something more appropriate immediately. Our boy also tied up her hair to make the illustration easier. With a level of contempt beyond measurable scale, the other girl said she never imagined she'd meet someone with such disgusting tastes. Our protagonist asked her to avoid using such offensive words, saying he had carefully chosen something comfortable. Even though he admitted that the shorts might be a bit too short, just when it seemed he was going to change her outfit, the human hamburger pleaded earnestly for him not to. Our protagonist ignored it, and to the displeasure and suffering of that poor sandwich, the girl was now wearing pants. Trying to take advantage of that ability for herself, the school bestie asked if he could create designer clothes. Our boy never imagined she was like that. While they were talking, the silver-haired girl brought up a completely irrelevant detail. Her last name was no longer Libershin, it was now Kleshuch, a noble surname since she had become a princess. But our protagonist was completely lost in the beauty of her hair. Unfortunately, many things had happened in her life. For all intents and purposes, she had ended the life of her husband and future heir. And our protagonist kept insisting he didn't want to know her backstory, saying that everything she was saying made no sense. Still, you could tell she had lived a tragic and painful life. This was the first time he showed empathy toward her. Our boy admitted that he didn't want the details, assuming she must be suffering from some sort of terminal illness, which surprised the girl, because that was exactly the case. And that wasn't all. Her marriage had clearly been arranged with someone she never loved. She had most likely been betrayed with one of the maids. Falsely accused of something, she became the villain of that narrative. In the midst of that misunderstanding, an accident occurred. With tears in her eyes, the silver-haired girl revealed that this was the absolute truth. Our protagonist knew she had suffered a lot, but she no longer needed to carry that burden here. The girl was still struggling to process everything. Our protagonist affirmed that she had done everything in self-defense. He blessed the girl's body with an S-rank blessing, saying she had done nothing wrong. That brought a pleasant sensation to her. Our protagonist said that every disease in her body had been cured. She no longer suffered from that illness. Now she could live however she wanted in this new world. It was the first time she had ever heard something like that, not even her father, who was a very powerful man, or her most admired friend, not even her fiancé, who was a despicable person. None of them gave her freedom. And now she had received that wonderful gift from a man she had just met. As the protagonist of a ridiculous, nonsensical romance, she was not only grateful, she was clearly interested in the boy. And our protagonist realized there was something more going on. That's when the system interrupted to report the number of monsters defeated, which triggered a new achievement. That was also a sign that his story was only just beginning. The system said the boy had caught the attention of the constellations. By pleasing these entities, he could receive abilities, sponsorships, and exclusive items. Our boy got lost in the sea of messages he was receiving. Several constellations were very interested in him, but it seemed he wasn't interested in any of them. He asked the system to block all those entities. In the face of the protagonist's indifference, the system asked why he would reject such good opportunities. And our boy said he wasn't a fan of that kind of thing. The system insisted on continuing the conversation, but our protagonist simply ignored the screen, focusing entirely on the people who were there with him. He asked if they were interested in joining him to save the world. While they were having that conversation, the Celestial Council of Constellations had convened. Various entities from another dimension were watching Earth. One of them was furious. A mere mortal had rejected the favor of a constellation. He was the representative of wrath. Another entity said it was becoming quite entertaining. He was the representative of games. Meanwhile, the one representing cuisine believed it was time to teach the boy a lesson. Then one who wore a crown on his head asked everyone to remain calm. He was the king of all constellations. Even though that being was just a human, he had passed through the Tower of Trials and deserved their respect. The constellation of despair said it was impossible, as he was only human. Meanwhile, the constellation of envy claimed the boy had skipped all floors, requesting that he be sent to their dimension. They wanted to know if the boy had the potential to disturb the order of the universe, and if that were confirmed, he would destroy the boy with his own hands. Finally, he had distributed all the power he possessed. Now his companions could destroy those monsters however they wished, except for the human sandwich, who was quite upset. In fact, the girls were upset too. They didn't want to fight those terrifying creatures either. Trying to reassure them, he said they were now his companions and were protected by the superpower of the plot. They couldn't die. The girl from school said the protagonist could do all of that alone, but he replied that she was ignoring the obvious. Even if he is capable of doing everything, doing it alone is no fun at all. At that moment, a creature tries to ambush him from behind, but it doesn't even manage to touch him, exploding against his barrier. The more powerful the protagonist of a story is, the more interesting the narrative of the supporting characters becomes. The schoolgirl still doesn't understand what he means, while the transmigrated girl seems to have grasped something. She asks if it's really necessary to eliminate the monsters to save this world. She had already taken the life of her own husband, who was the natural heir to the crown, and now she feels capable of ending anything, leaving her other companions slightly unsettled by her attitude. Immediately, she turns to the first monster that tried to approach. To make this story even more interesting, our protagonist will do everything within his power. The first step is to form a team, and the transmigrated girl's role has just been defined by him. Using the malice hidden in her heart, she began unleashing multiple strikes, turning that enormous creature into several small pieces. It gave her a suspicious sense of freedom. On a man's face, that expression would seem unhinged. He is a dagger assassin. The schoolgirl asks why that woman was so terrifying, while our protagonist is pleased they already have such a well-defined character. All of those were feelings the dagger assassin had never experienced before. While she was lost in thought, a creature tried to ambush her from behind, successfully grabbing her with its tentacles. The danger is imminent, the sandwich guy is worried, and the other girl realized they needed to act quickly. The sandwich didn't hesitate to save that girl, and our protagonist encouraged him to do so while calling the boy the beatdown sandwich. This is another character whose story is being shaped. His eyes shine, burning with the determination of someone easily charmed by pretty women. He struck the creature vigorously with his body made of bread. Beatdown Sandwich didn't want his ability to be so trivial. He had become the team's mascot. In the end, he voiced his protest to the protagonist. Beatdown Sandwich asked to receive something cooler, but the dagger assassin was grateful to him. Trying to use the charm only a sandwich could have, he said he'd do anything for her. Now there's only one person left, but the schoolgirl remains extremely frightened, unsure why she should be doing any of this. To keep the flow going, our protagonist suggested she also show the ability she received, but she was too scared and didn't want to. She said he was powerful enough to turn back time, and that he was personally chosen by God, and that he should fix everything before the world collapses into chaos. The lives of ordinary people are falling apart, and some are on the verge of death at any moment. Fun shouldn't be that important. Completely contradicting the girl's reasonable opinion, our protagonist said that fun is fundamental. Never mind, we move forward. And one day she would understand the truth behind those words. Since in this new world, fun has become the most important thing. That's when she realized the atmosphere of the place had completely shifted, until the boy asked her to look behind her because a dangerous creature was approaching quickly. He recommended she defeat that monster using the magic she had received. Not knowing exactly what she was doing, she began swinging her staff with her eyes closed. She decided to use it like a club, hitting the creature squarely as if it were a baseball, leaving everyone who witnessed it slightly impressed. The result of her actions turned the creature into jelly. The girl found it disgusting because she is the strong warrior. The mascot said her stance was just like a baseball player's, and the girl revealed she used to play when she was younger. Our protagonist hadn't expected her to become that kind of character. That's when he felt a presence behind him. It required him to act more seriously. That power definitely didn't seem like the work of an ordinary monster, and a figure revealed itself to the group, saying he was impressed that our protagonist had been able to interfere with his power, and had done so with his bare hands. That's when our protagonist realized it could only mean one thing. While that mysterious man is impressed that there are strong people in that place, even though the situation is dangerous, our protagonist is completely thrilled by the existence of this person, his demon. The man didn't expect the boy to know his identity. Our protagonist said he's a big fan. He never imagined he was real. That's when the girl asked what was wrong with him and who that mysterious person was. And our protagonist breaks the fourth wall once again, suggesting we check out the story called Chiyama, whose protagonist is a grand martial arts master. In the story, he's a villain, the pinnacle of antagonism. The mysterious man said our boy talks too much and asked if that massive energy from the east belonged to him. That made our protagonist remember what he had done with his fingers. The shockwave really did go in that direction, and he admitted he was the one responsible for it. 1,000 demons said humanity had stopped evolving, becoming weak. Even he was losing interest in this world full of uninteresting people. But on that day, things seemed to be changing, as if the truth of the world was being rewritten. Several monsters began appearing everywhere. 1,000 demons saw in that a great opportunity to be happy, enjoying the pleasure that chaos could bring. He was about to surrender himself entirely to that new sensation. That's when a powerful flash of energy quickly approached his location. Unlike anything that had appeared so far, that energy was definitely powerful, requiring him to put up his most effective barrier. The power passed through him like a runaway train, but 1,000 demons remained intact. Even though he protected himself, everything around him was completely obliterated. And that wasn't all. Looking back, he saw something even more surprising. He was able to witness the world reversing time instantly. Everything that had been destroyed was coming back. He was certain it could only be the work of an utterly supreme master. His instincts told him to move toward the source of that power immediately, crossing oceans. And so he did, until he reached our protagonist. Now we realize that the boy only listened to his backstory because he's a fan of martial arts. When it was the best friend's romance arc, he skipped it by every means possible. I can't judge, I do the same. A schoolgirl asked how someone in China can speak Korean too, and our protagonist asked for some common sense, telling her to stop demanding rational explanations for everything in this story. Now 1,000 Demons has found this unknown master and said he's going to kill our protagonist. He hopes it will be an interesting match, but the boy is still completely starstruck by the presence of his idol. 1,000 Demons is looking forward to the fun of the deadly duel. Our protagonist team began to feel sorry for this weird man who doesn't know what he's asking for. The martial warrior prepares one of his attacks, sending toward our protagonist the destructive palm of the celestial demonic dragon, a truly devastating attack. The resulting explosion destroyed a large portion of the area, but our protagonist managed to dodge it, saying it was too slow. That caused great surprise in the heart of the mysterious man who didn't expect that. The boy reveals he always wanted to do that, surprise his opponent from behind while mocking the dodged attack. He gained his power through awakening, but he'd like to know how that mysterious man got so strong, completely ignoring the fact that they were in a battle. That's when 1,000 Demons politely excused himself. He lost interest in the conflict. He prefers to go on with his life hunting the monsters that have appeared on Earth. As he walks away from the protagonist's team, he admits it was a big waste of time, and the mascot suggests he's running away after realizing his technique is useless. Even so, he insists that place has no future. That's when our protagonist decided to behave more firmly. While gently gripping the mysterious man's shoulder, he said he was crossing a few lines and should be more respectful when referring to that land. Sensing the protagonist's threatening power, 1,000 Demons quickly pulled out of the reach of his hand. But he was truly shocked by it. It should have been impossible. The boy shouldn't have been able to get close to him without being noticed. Determined to eliminate this possible threat, 1,000 Demons launch a lethal attack toward our protagonist. The boy watches the incoming strike as if it were just a cheap, low-budget fireworks show. The stones thrown by that power are already very close to him, and our boy manages to catch the largest one with his hands. Finally, the impact causes a massive explosion, surrounded by a very dark aura coming from 1,000 Demons. Watching all of that were the very well-drawn, well-fed girls, worried about the boy's health condition. That demonic art of 1,000 Demons is capable of consuming the very concept of physical space. And from within that mass, our protagonist emerges quite enthusiastic, saying that it was incredibly refreshing. That left 1,000 Demons speechless, and our boy said that even if he's being inconvenient, he's still really cool. There's no denying it, the boy is completely amazed by his favorite character, and asked him to become his companion on this journey. A completely anticlimactic proposal, because 1,000 Demons is still trying to process that the technique he perfected for centuries didn't work. Completely frustrated and furious, he said he's the strongest man under the heavens, that he would never lose to a brat. Hearing him claim to be the strongest man under the heavens offended our protagonist, and he just thought of something really fun to do about it. Raising one of his hands, he began to concentrate his power, drawing 1,000 Demons' attention. Because now he's not going to have a normal life, our protagonist is going to use his transmogrification ability. A very familiar sensation was felt by the human hamburger, and the body of the man standing in front of them began to be surrounded by a green mist. Trying to understand what it was, the man began to feel uneasy, sensing it was some kind of cheap trick. Until he noticed his voice had changed, my friend, a lot more than that had changed. A feat as unexpected as it was shocking. The protagonist's team was speechless, and our protagonist said that he was no longer the strongest man under the heavens, but rather, the most powerful woman under the heavens. At that moment, the one who was once a man is still very confused. The protagonist's girlfriends are upset. The warrior of strength is particularly disgusted, and our boy is trying to explain himself. He said that changing a character's gender for comedic effect is a very creative storytelling element, though it's fallen out of fashion lately. That's when the warrior began a woke speech, immediately interrupted by the protagonist, saying her lines couldn't go beyond 3 sentences, until he was caught off guard by the character who used to be a man, now wanting to return to his original form. But all our protagonist does is flick him on the head, frustrating any attempt at resistance. He said it's been a while since she got smacked, but she'll get punished again if she keeps acting like that. The protagonist team is shocked by this excessive violence against a woman, while the hamburger man wishes he could return to normal. After educating that person, our boy believes his team is now complete. Chiyama, who is the man that became a woman, would like to return to his original form, but it seems that won't be happening. Our protagonist ignored everything that was said to him and told his companions to start hunting the monsters nearby. He'll let those people work in his place while he teleports to another location, claiming that his actions are far more important. After all, he's going to save the entire world, leaving behind a newly formed group of people who don't know or trust one another. While all this was happening, the government of the United States of America was trying to take some kind of action. The president of the nation was in a meeting with high-ranking officials to discuss the ongoing disasters. They need the president to make a decision, but that Signal man can only think about nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, that would mean attacking their own territory. The Secretary of Defense is filled with sorrow but can't bring himself to disagree, even if they use all the weapons they currently have, from conventional ones using gunpowder and projectiles, to ballistic ones like intercontinental missiles, next-generation jets, or chemical weapons. As long as that spatial rift remains open, they are unable to reduce the number of monsters. That's when the president, visibly angry, realized there were no other options available. He just wished it were possible to blow up the rifts themselves. and that's when our boy appeared in the meeting room, saying he could solve that problem. Since nothing surprises people anymore in this world, the president skipped the introductions and asked who the boy was pleased to meet him. He introduced himself as the pervert of Korea, 17 years old, and the future savior of the world. That grand conference room was filled with an awkward silence that lasted for what felt like an eternity. The security team reacted immediately, asking who that stranger was, while our protagonist said he had a proposal. But the security guard kept threatening to shoot, while our boy said someone could get hurt. The Secretary of Defense noticed that the boy had appeared out of nowhere. He could be a monster because of that, so they should act quickly. The president asked them to wait. But that moment was already filled with too much tension, and one of the guards fired. He kept shooting until he nearly emptied his weapon, but the man couldn't believe what he was seeing with his own eyes. A very popular scene from a 1999 movie was happening. Our boy had recreated a barrier capable of stopping bullets in physical reality. These things only made him happier, since it's really fun to be able to do all of this. After letting the bullets fall to the ground, he asked if the president understood things now, because if he did, he should fully trust the boy. Now that he had everyone's attention, he asked the president to launch all the nuclear weapons. The man knew it was a drastic measure and couldn't do something like that without a very solid justification. Skipping the entire negotiation phase, our protagonist used his mass manipulation ability, reaching every person in that room with his power. All those ordinary men had become his minions, completely subservient. One of them reached for the desk phone that was there. It was the president who took control, passing a code to the military so the Neo-Doomsday Protocol would be executed. All nuclear weapons were to be launched immediately. The order spread through the chain of command, leaving those responsible for executing such an atrocious act absolutely terrified. There was no other option. These men had to do what they were ordered. The first nuclear missile was launched from a submarine hidden somewhere on the planet. Those dangerous weapons were cutting through the sky. The exact number of them was completely unknown. But at that moment, our protagonist knew that nearly 8,000 missiles had been launched. He was sure that this would be enough to solve the problem, since he was using another ability he had, the invisible hand, materializing a giant human hand made of magic. Using another ability, the boy was replicating the first one he created, sending each of his hands toward the missiles flying through the atmosphere. Each hand had a single command: grab a missile and make sure none escape. Little by little, they were being captured by our protagonist's hands, and he gave them another order, that those weapons be thrown into the portal. Immediately, the projectiles began adjusting their trajectories. Each one was being directed toward a specific portal. Our protagonist could already taste the victory achieved through his genius strategy. In Russia's capital, other powerful figures were gathered. The government's top officials had learned that their rival nation had launched all its nuclear weapons, and generals suggested immediate retaliation. That's when our protagonist appeared in that place, saying there was no need to do something like that. The guards didn't even ask who he was, they opened fire on the stranger right away, forcing the boy to perform that incredibly popular scene from a certain May 21, 1999 movie again, leaving those men terrified, since that should have been completely impossible. At the US Command Center, they noticed the portals were disappearing. Our boy appeared to say that it was his doing, thanking the authorities for trusting him enough to launch all those weapons. That's when the president realized what had happened and immediately became worried about the consequences, until our boy said the weapons exploded inside the portals, causing no collateral damage. The men instantly began to celebrate the presence of the Korean hero. As he said his goodbyes, he told them they now needed to deal with the monsters that had already escaped through the portals, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Back in our protagonist's homeland, his team was still hunting all those creatures. As soon as he arrived, the boy said the team was doing very well. The only one who welcomed him warmly was the dagger assassin. The warrior said she nearly died several times, and the other one, well, it's obvious why she's still upset. The sandwich said that a missile exploded in the rift and asked if our protagonist had something to do with it, and he confirmed. This boy is still thinking a lot about his team composition, realizing he needs someone to take the role of tank. Immersed in his own thoughts, he didn't notice a green energy pillar appearing behind him. It was a source of intense light, strong enough to blind the eyes. It was the constellation that had come to inspect our protagonist, stating that his actions had shaken the universe. And that woman, the representative of justice, came to Earth to judge him. For this, I wasn't prepared, turning a constellation into a waifu. And apparently not even the protagonist's team was ready for the suffering expression of that mysterious woman. But since she was wielding a sword and wearing full armor, our protagonist had just found the tank for his team. The trap of the team can already feel the power coming from this person, a true master, and our protagonist asked her not to do anything. He went straight to the system to ask a few questions because he was concerned about some things. He wanted to know what the system had told those constellations, and the system reminded our boy that he had blocked those entities. That's when he realized he really had done that. Approaching the mysterious woman, he said there had been a big misunderstanding. He didn't mean to be rude, but he was very busy having to save Earth. The woman said that was exactly the problem. Humanity hadn't sacrificed enough. All of it was because of our protagonist. He seemed unable to believe those words, deeply shocked by them. He began asking if the appearance of the portals and the death of all those innocent people were the result of the constellation's actions. The woman didn't hesitate to make the truth more palatable. She simply confirmed responsibility. From here on, a long explanation about history and science begins. All living beings in the universe produce energy, which is consumed by the constellation so they can survive. They call this negentropy. They created this system as a farm. the more intelligent the species, the more energy it produces. To grow stronger, these beings, the constellations, create challenges. Some species emerge stronger, producing even more energy for these entities, while others are completely wiped out, becoming raw material for better prepared species. And our protagonist overcame the challenge alone, preventing humanity from growing as a whole. The entities wanted to monitor his progress up until now, but because they were blocked, it caused great concern. So the woman volunteered to judge him personally. All of that explanation to our boy is completely ridiculous. An explanation that makes no sense at all. He can't believe he wasted his time listening to that. The author of this story just shoved in some science fiction elements completely out of nowhere. So he asked the hamburger man to summarize everything he heard in just 3 lines. For those who skipped those pages of explanation, the 4th wall will now be broken here. The entities feed on humanity's energy. They create trials to grow stronger. Our boy stopped that from happening. Now he can return to the main storyline, recognizing that the entities must be insane beings. The dagger assassin says she can't forgive people like that, but the trap stopped her from attacking. Saying they're not on the same level as that woman, intervening is not an option for them. Our protagonist is already using a powerful technique invoking the void itself, reconfiguring that technique to form a sword. Now he's ready to face that woman as she presented herself, revealing that he doesn't like the constellations. Unleashing a powerful slash at her with that sword, definitely more powerful than any of his previous attacks. The woman took a defensive stance, believing she could withstand it, which she did, effortlessly, with a single movement of her sword. That made our boy thoughtful, because his attack was a denial of existence itself, an attack that was blocked like it was nothing. Now the woman turns to the transcendent of Earth, our protagonist, stating that he's no match for her in battle. Our boy doesn't seem to believe that. He unleashes another even more powerful ability, the Planet Destroyer. The glow of the attack completely lights up the woman's face, but it fails to push her bangs to the other side so we can see if she has both eyes. And the powerful energy beam travels into space, leaving a bright trail in its path. The woman remains untouched, but this time she complemented the force of that strike. Our protagonist is starting to get nervous, trying to use a combination of abilities to win this challenge, while his opponent began sighing, disappointed by the situation. The boy said they were now going to deliver an intense action scene, but didn't notice one of his hands had been taken. The one responsible was the woman's sword, and apparently she's not asking for ransom. Completely overpowered by the woman's strength, everyone was stunned, while she told the boy to accept her judgment. The pain he felt now was extremely real, but he decided to stay in the fight, using his technique to rewind time. He would do it as many times as necessary, managing to fully restore the hand he had lost. He was willing to keep going back in time until he could defeat that enemy, but something was wrong. The entity in front of him revealed she was completely immune to that type of manipulation, and our protagonist had to stop the team's trap from attacking the woman. This is definitely a dangerous situation. Our boy is already wondering what the author is trying to do, because there's nothing he can do against that woman. She was already running out of patience, asking our protagonist to accept the judgment at once. That's when the boy asked her what this was all about. She sheathed her sword and summoned another object, showing our protagonist a golden scale. That was the scale of justice. The woman said that certain values would be placed on each side of the scale, and their weight would be measured by the laws of the universe. The lack of interest on our protagonist's face was obvious, and the entity realized he hated explanations, so she decided to show him in a practical way the benefits of his existence in that universe and the danger he also represents. Both would be weighed on the scale now. The problem was that our boy hadn't paid attention again and didn't know what each side of the scale meant. None of that mattered. The weights had already been placed. The result was in. Our protagonist's presence in that universe represented a great danger, and the decision of that scale is absolute truth. That's why the entity said she would suppress him now. For a moment, the boy was completely speechless, until he gave a confident smile. He said that if that scale could judge any problem humanity faces, he'd like one of them to be resolved. And the woman said that from a cosmic perspective, humanity's problems are far too trivial, and that her name is Renee, but she'll be the constellation of justice to us. That made our protagonist even more confident in the scale's abilities. She couldn't ignore a request like that. She asked what kind of values the boy wanted to weigh. His team was already starting to get worried about this, but he assured them everything would be fine, since this was going to be fun. He couldn't ignore the idea of a cosmic scale balance game. He knew exactly what to ask that woman. A plus 99 reinforced wooden stick, or the story? What's more fun? That was so unexpected that the poor entity didn't even know what to say. The unanimous reaction in that place, our protagonist's team was completely lost. Even the human hamburger, who had been the most mentally resilient until now, couldn't grasp the idea. A truly idiotic question. The constellation of justice still didn't understand what the protagonist had said, but he asked another question. What would be more fun? The guy with the super powerful stick, or Korea's most famous necromancer? He was talking about solo leveling. Even the girls in his group didn't know what those stories were, which shocked the protagonist, since they're extremely popular. Because of that, he asked the warrior girl to sell him her brain since it wasn't being of much use. He realized he could also erase his own memories using one of his abilities. The human hamburger just asked the constellation of justice to ignore that behavior, because the boy was obsessed with webtoons. The woman said that the scale of justice couldn't judge trivial things like human emotions as he had requested. Faced with this limitation, our protagonist stated that the constellation didn't understand much about this world. There's nothing more important here than fun. Knowing that he now wanted to make her a little dumber, and the previously dangerous and hostile environment had completely changed. The boy asked her to confirm whether she really worked to maintain universal order, and the constellation of justice confirmed. The consequences of a disruption in reality could have unimaginable effects. That made the boy realize that by her logic, he should be sacrificed to prevent such consequences. The constellation of justice tried to downplay the severity of the situation, while our boy realized that she wanted to carry out small sacrifices for the greater good. And from a cosmic perspective, speaking about universal order is incredibly biased, because from her point of view it sounds logical, but from a human perspective it's completely unjust. The constellation of justice realized she was being cornered by the arguments of a sophist, someone who claimed to be more important than the universe itself. But our boy asked her to let the scale decide if his forced sacrifice from a cosmic perspective was just or unjust. They needed to weigh these truths on the scale of justice. The constellation did as the boy asked, and the plates were perfectly balanced, until one of them became significantly heavier than the other. The warrior girl grew worried, not knowing what had happened, until the protagonist reassured her that the result was obvious. Still holding the scale in her hand, the constellation of justice remained completely silent, and our protagonist asked if she still intended to restrain someone labeled a danger to the universe, she, who is the very representative of justice. The woman said our protagonist was absolutely right, recognizing the injustice of the situation. Seeing that the woman was no longer going to attack them, the dagger assassin said our protagonist was very clever, while the ultra girls still didn't understand a single thing. But he made sure to sum it up for her. Justice depends on perspective. Since the constellation seemed deeply lost in thought, the boy asked if he could make a suggestion to her. If she was worried about his actions, she could just keep an eye on him, suggesting that she stay by his side. It was never his intention to cause this kind of problem, and he was upset that those entities attacked humanity. If they were superior beings, they should have helped. The constellation of justice acknowledged that this was a very rational suggestion, promising that she would always stay by his side. Watching all of this in awe was the trap, seeing a cosmic being get talked into submission. And the boy had one last question. Was what the constellations did to Earth by opening those portals just? For a brief moment, she was speechless, as if she already knew the answer to that question. The result from the scale was far too predictable after all that dialogue, and our protagonist couldn't hide his satisfaction. While the constellation of justice remained thoughtful, as if she were disappointed, she sighed deeply, a gesture that made the protagonist concerned. Right after that, the constellation of justice ascended to the heavens as if she had something very important to resolve. Her flight was as swift as it was short. She was already above Earth and space. Using the full vastness of her powers, she began cleansing the Earth. Various creatures were still roaming freely, spreading terror and danger wherever they went. It didn't take long before they were reached by the power of that celestial woman. People who had lost all hope witnessed a miracle. The monsters that were once dangerous were now being consumed by a mysterious energy. That inexplicable event was spreading across the entire Earth. Every one of those creatures that didn't belong to this world was being annihilated. All of it through the power of the constellation of justice. Thanks to the immense power she possessed, she was purifying Earth completely. The glow formed in the sky was intense and blinding, and at the same time it resembled a flash of hope. The trap noticed that the demonic energy on Earth had completely vanished. As soon as the woman reappeared before them, our protagonist praised what she had done, acknowledging that a constellation was incredibly powerful. She felt she was being used by the boy, but he insisted it was all just her imagination. Protecting Earth was now absurdly easy, and there was one more major bonus. Our protagonist had gained a reliable and unbelievably powerful companion. Her beauty was so striking that everyone on the team, without exception, was left in shock. Since she removed her armor, it caused quite a stir, but the constellation said she did it because she was no longer in combat. Our protagonist couldn't look at her in that outfit for too long and used his transformation ability, dressing her in traditional Earth clothing, once again realizing just how stunning she truly was. She didn't understand why she should wear something that didn't protect her body and began to take off her clothes, to our protagonist's despair. He stated that she had to remain dressed no matter what. For the spirit of justice, that was a very difficult human behavior to understand. Even the system came to speak with the boy because something needed to be addressed. The other constellations were even more upset, assuming he had deceived the constellation of justice. But that only made our protagonist angrier, because he believed humans were being used in this situation. He decided he would crush those entities. Before he could do that, the system informed him that the master of the Tower of Trials wished to meet him personally. And the constellation of justice said that many entities believe the master of the tower should be held responsible for all of this, since he granted such a powerful ability without justification. The system said it would guide our boy to the dimension of eternal night. Agreeing to go, the boy said he'd share a few of his thoughts, and the system said he would be transported immediately, which caught the boy off guard, since he hadn't prepared himself. He said he had just made several new companions, and it would be a shame to arrive there alone. The trap didn't want to get involved in it, the sandwich man wanted to go back to normal, and the dagger assassin had no idea what was going on. That's when our protagonist said the system was transporting all of them now, discreetly, while whispering to the system to hurry up and just follow the order, confirming that all of them were being sent, which left the warrior girl deeply worried. A great pillar of light appeared from the sky, enveloping all of them. In the blink of an eye, there was no one left on that street. Those who are mortal were having an intense experience with that form of transportation, while the constellation of justice passed through it effortlessly, until finally, everything came to an end. The small group had arrived at their destination, a completely different dimension covered by a sky filled with moons. The protagonist's friends were nauseous and had no idea where they were. Looking around, our boy assumed this must be the final floor of the Tower of Trials, and a mysterious voice welcomed the Constellation of Justice. It was an honor to have someone like her as a guest. The mysterious figure introduced himself to everyone. His name was Tsukoshi Nujo, the master of the tower, and he was pleased to welcome the constellation there, despite the companions she had brought along, because he did not tolerate the presence of those inferior beings in that sacred place. Revealing a physical constitution similar to that of an abomination, he displayed all his power, saying he would eliminate those humans. The warrior girl was terrified, and the human hamburger made one last request. He'd like to eat a sandwich before he died. Watching everything with a smile on his face was our protagonist, saying they have finally reached this point. This was their first battle against a dungeon boss as a full team. The Tower Master stood menacingly before the hero's group. Our boy watched all of it unfold before his eyes, unable to hide his great expectation that all this would be fun. The team's girlfriends were scared. They didn't believe they could possibly face something like that, until our protagonist tried to reassure everyone. If they worked together, they'd manage. That's when the Tower Master grabbed the boy in his hands, asking how he dared arrive there without climbing all the floors. Our protagonist didn't appreciate that. He'd just been beaten up by the Constellation of Justice and wasn't looking forward to another beatdown. Slammed into the ground by the Tower Master, the boy heard him say he was tired of being insulted, and that now he would explain what the real problem was. The boy was ignorant, arrogant, sly, stubborn, and egocentric. Besides being irresponsible and vulgar, our protagonist's entire body was in pain, and what truly bothered him was having to listen to this whole explanation. Until the Tower Master said that above all these things, the boy was completely selfish. He said this while hitting him hard with one of his hands. The energy was so intense it caused our protagonist to scream in agony. The Tower Master said he would make the boy experience all the pain he should have felt while climbing the tower, making sure he paid for everything. Meanwhile, the protagonist's team watched everything with great concern. With the boy's body in hand, the dungeon boss apologized to the other living beings, but said they would have to die. That's when a mysterious voice declared that only one person would die there, and it would be the dungeon boss. Emerging from the shadows came our beloved Trapped, surprising the Tower Master with an attack, landing a massive blow on the Tower Master's face. It didn't seem to have any effect, and the creature admitted that yes, this all seemed very unfair, immediately imprisoning the Trap with his magic, causing them to scream out in pain. He praised their resilience. Even without being transcendent, they managed to endure it. It was a shame, but he claimed the boy was responsible for their death. With those two now imprisoned, the Tower Master apologized to the Constellation of Justice, saying he didn't want her to see this side of him. That's when she asked if this was the proper way to treat the human who had surpassed the tower according to the rules he himself had established. The dungeon boss acknowledged that he too was a being who served the constellations, and since he also served the Constellation of Wrath, he was merely fulfilling his duty. Now our protagonist realized that there was a constellation very interested in him, just not in a good way. Faced with that simple explanation, the Constellation of Justice realized he had a plausible justification. Everyone, except the Constellation of Justice, was thinking the same thing at that moment. They were absolutely going to die in that place, until someone said that wouldn't happen. It was our protagonist who seemed tired of taking beatings. His body was now glowing with a blue light, a move so surprising that it left the Tower Master in disbelief, wanting to know how such an inferior being could escape his authority. Our boy casually remembered the words used to describe him, ignorant and arrogant. And in stories like this, it's only natural for the protagonist to counterattack after taking a hit. But before he could do anything, he made sure to free his companion. She also didn't know what had happened, and our protagonist asked her not to forget the feeling of near death she had just experienced. Because if she feels like she's dying, it means she absolutely won't die, especially if she reads that word written in red. Faced with all that confidence, the Constellation of Justice was even more impressed, seeing that a mere human was facing the master of the tower without any trouble. The creature admitted it had underestimated our boy, but claimed he was still wrong about one thing. The companions he brought to that place were going to die. Seeing his friends being attacked in his place, he said the Tower Master was quite cunning while blocking the strike. Now the entity is frightened, trying to understand how the boy has grown so powerful since his strength has increased by thousands of times. The time has come for our protagonist to shine. He was born to say these words, revealing to the creature that he had only been using 1/1,000,000th of his total power. And we know that, don't know if you remember, but he had to reduce his own power when he destroyed that creature. Our protagonist is truly a madman. He got so carried away with the power he received that he did a few reckless things. That's why he placed a major limitation on his true power. Now, inside that dimension that isn't his, he has no restrictions whatsoever. The human hamburger watches all of it in utter terror. Our boy said the enemy is far too strong, and there's no way his team can take part in this fight now. Using one of his countless abilities, he launched attacks against the Tower Master, who was pierced as if he were made of paper. As the pain spread through his flesh, the entity felt that such a thing should be impossible. Our protagonist said that the entity's stubbornness ends here, and the Tower Master turned to the Constellation of Justice, saying something was wrong. The boy's power comes from him. It shouldn't be greater than the source itself. When he was about to ask her for help, he was struck again by the boy, the one I once called irresponsible. After all, an entity millions of years old should clean up its own mess without asking others for help. While our boy reflects on his own words, the entity is in agony. having lost one of its hands, saying it couldn't disappear since its absence would plunge that entire dimension into chaos, threatening the very order of the universe. This wise choice of words stirred the constellation of justice. But even though she was disturbed, our protagonist sliced the Tower Master into 2 pieces, inflicting a celestial pain upon the creature. Its final words to our protagonist were that he would regret this, but he wasn't taken seriously. At last, what was left of his body vanished like dust. That's when the constellation of justice realized she hadn't even seen the strike. And worse, a human had just defeated a cosmic entity. Our protagonist apologized to his team, acknowledging that they must be worried. All of them want to return to Earth, and some want to return to their original form. While they were talking, he noticed something. He could have said something far more egocentric when he defeated the creature, and that regret will follow him forever. Seeing how much it bothered him, his team was disappointed, until he came face to face again with the system screen. For defeating the Tower Master, his ascension process had begun. He was now in the first stage. The boy assumed this must be some kind of benefit that could be used in battle, and was already curious about how many stages there were. That's when the constellation of justice asked if the deviant knew what he had just done. He had now become an enemy of all the other constellations. The boy answered her question with another, saying he had no choice. If he hadn't won, he would have died, then asked if the constellation of justice had really wanted that. He then said not all constellations are against him, as he had earned a powerful ally. But the woman replied that she never said that. Remembering what he heard from the Tower Master, he asked to be sent to the constellation of Wrath, and the constellation of Justice asked if he was thinking of fighting her. That alone was madness, and the boy said he would try to resolve things through dialogue. That seemed to please the constellation of Justice, while the warrior believed the protagonist was just an idiot. The human hamburger seized the moment to praise the protagonist's feats, suggesting they return to Earth and celebrate until the end of days. I know nothing had been said yet, but a golden magic circle appeared beneath all their feet. The protagonist's team was being sent to another dimension. Once again, the transportation was far too harsh for everyone, but since he was at full power, our protagonist didn't feel a thing. They finally arrived at the place where the constellation of Wrath resides. The first impression our protagonist had was that he was completely lost, and the constellation of Justice began to explain. That was the domain of Huja Karuna, the constellation of Wrath. It looked like they were inside a volcano. The place was scorching hot, and the cheese in the hamburger was melting completely. The warrior didn't understand why they were being dragged around to all these places by the protagonist, and he said that having his friends nearby made him stronger, but coming from someone so egocentric, it was hard to believe. However, the dagger assassin seemed to have no defenses against that kind of phrase. She believed every syllable. That's when a sinister laugh began to fill the air of that place. Sensing imminent danger, the constellation of Justice armored herself with her sword and shield, as the constellation of Wrath revealed himself, asking why she brought those insects into his lair. An overwhelming force clashed against them, causing massive destruction. The form of the constellation of Wrath was that of a middle-aged man in armor. He attacked the constellation of Justice while calling her a fool. For the first time, she had to block a truly powerful strike, showing that this constellation before her wielded immense power, until the man casually said it had been a long time since they'd last seen each other, only to be surprised by a punch to the face. It was our enraged protagonist who wouldn't tolerate anyone attacking his friends. Things happen on such an absurd scale in this story that the protagonist's team is constantly in shock, struggling to believe what they're seeing. That's when the constellation of Justice asked if he had forgotten he was supposed to resolve things through dialogue. It seemed like our protagonist had been waiting for the first chance to use violence. He hurled the entity's body away, slamming it into a wall. Now that he was at full power, he didn't believe the constellations posed much of a challenge. Worried, the constellation of Justice asked what he had just done, and our protagonist believed he was saving the woman. He revealed that Karuna cannot control his impulses. He tends to use violence to resolve everything. In the beginning, the dimension assigned to him was a marvelous place, so beautiful it could make anyone sigh at its landscapes. But that man was completely incapable of controlling himself. Having discovered that planet so late in life, he began to grow furious, manifesting his wrath in that once beautiful place. And the planet that was once an oasis would be lucky to survive such fury. After destroying everything, the man grew even angrier, knowing this was always how he behaved. Now understanding what he suffers from, our protagonist said he was just a stupid man. And the constellation of Wrath grew even more furious, because an insect had dared touch his face. The power coming from his hands was so intense it melted the stones on the ground. That's when the constellation of Justice realized they were in serious trouble. The dimension of fire was integrated into that man. If his fury exploded, the volcano they were standing in would explode as well. And the lava of that place was made of an extremely dangerous material. Our protagonist realized this could be deadly. Fully determined, he intended to calm the man down using an ability capable of reaching absolute zero, causing the entire body of the constellation to be enveloped in ice. But his technique proved completely ineffective. The man shattered the ice with ease. Justice said that Karuna was the very embodiment of rage. They wouldn't be able to stop him. But what our protagonist wanted to stop was the excessive explanation. Returning to the fight, he managed to pair the man's strike with one of his hands. This constellation before him was on a completely different level, far beyond the Tower Master. Wrath said he really liked the cold he had felt. He had never experienced anything like that before, and it made him furious. Our protagonist had trouble understanding what he was saying, so he used an empathy ability, which was directed at the embodiment of rage. Little by little, the man felt something changing in his mind. Justice said that could be dangerous, but our protagonist assured her he was trying to calm him down while connecting their emotions. The embodiment of wrath said no one had ever entered his mind before. It felt good, but it also made him feel even more unstable. Watching everything unfold, Justice said that our protagonist would be consumed by fury, but that ability did not achieve its goal. The constellation looked like a zombie, as if something was wrong. Our protagonist apologized for having blocked him and ignored his messages. He also apologized for throwing the first punch and asked if they could resolve things through dialogue. The dialogue was already heading his way in the form of a clenched fist, while the constellation of wrath said that failure just wouldn't shut up. Our boy managed to defend against the attack, but was deeply offended at being called a failure. After grabbing him by the neck, the constellation of wrath said his need entropy value was too low. Humanity was meant to be annihilated, but the boy had ruined everything. That's when Justice stepped in, asking if the gates were really placed on Earth to exterminate humans, something the furious man confirmed. Barely able to take any more of the situation, our protagonist was visibly bothered by the excess of words being spoken. He finally gained access to the first stage of his ascension, unleashing a powerful surge of energy toward the man, who seemed surprised by the sudden attack. That was the planet-annihilating strike, and it seemed to be extremely effective. Cosmic order, constellations, none of that mattered to our protagonist, because he had decided to become the greatest protagonist of all webtoons ever written. The body of the man who couldn't control his own rage was now drifting through space, trying to understand how such a small insect possessed such immense power, enough to rival someone with over 10 stars. Our boy noticed that the color of his hair and eyes had changed, realizing it must be the effect of the first stage. While he was distracted, the constellation of wrath was returning to the battlefield, heading toward our boy like a ballistic missile. Furious and determined, he was eager to end our protagonist's life, who was only annoyed by the excessive exclamation points in that side character's speech bubble. He was already fed up with all the intensity, blocking the attack with a strike of his own. The attacking constellation of fury was forced to defend himself, realizing that the last blow had used all his power, yet still accomplished nothing. Meanwhile, our protagonist appeared slightly irritated with the situation, ready to keep landing blows, revealing that what truly made him angry were the exclamation points. Now was time to bring that conflict to an end. The boy struck the constellation of wrath with fury, saying the experience should be primarily fun. And with that, the cosmic entity had been defeated. Watching all of this from the sidelines was the constellation of Justice, who at that moment was left speechless, because a constellation had just been defeated by human hands. This could mean the collapse of the entire cosmic order of the universe. After being defeated, the entity began to laugh uncontrollably. He managed to rise again, renewed, admitting that all of it had been a lot of fun, and he wished our protagonist had shown up sooner. That's when the boy realized the boss had entered phase 2. Villain laughter is never a good sign, and the entity revealed that the protagonist's friends were already dead. After hearing this, he looked back deeply concerned, realizing that the heat was consuming all of them, and that the trap was about to do something dangerous. Hopefully, she could stop it. Justice said that the greater that man's rage, the more intense the heat becomes. Seeing they were distracted, the Herald of Wrath suggested not to worry about insects. They would soon disappear anyway. But that phrase filled our protagonist's heart with rage, and the constellation believed that humanity's fate was inevitable. Everything was already in motion. The Wrath virus had spread across Earth. Knowing this, our protagonist became worried for the first time during the fight, while the Herald of Wrath continued speaking, saying that every living being on Earth must have already been infected. They must have given into madness, destroying one another. Meanwhile, Justice was doing her best to tend to the wounded. Now was our protagonist's turn to get enraged, showing multiple exclamation marks in his speech bubble. Their battle was becoming more intense by the second, and Justice said the volcano would soon explode. Using one of her transport techniques, she declared they needed to get out of there. Our protagonist's body was caught in the teleportation, preventing his blow from landing on the Herald of Wrath, since all of them had now been transported out of that dimension. In the very next second, a massive explosion occurred, but our boy's team was already returning to Earth. Our protagonist is worried about the threat he heard. They need to protect Earth. Justice still remains deep in thought. She hadn't known that the portals on Earth were placed there to wipe out all of humanity. There is no justice in that kind of behavior. The glow of teleportation could already be seen in the sky, and our protagonist's team had finally arrived on Earth, safe and sound. Our boy began healing his friends while asking if everyone was okay. He apologized for everything that happened, since it was a consequence of his actions, without noticing that someone was approaching him. As soon as he looked to the side, he saw a person completely enraged. He had to dodge the incoming bite. The man was attacking like an animal. Apparently, that entity's threat was real. The people who remained on Earth had been consumed by the madness of rage, and a large number of innocents had been infected. This is the first challenge of the constellation of Wrath. A kind of zombie apocalypse had just begun. The concept of humanity, or what it means to be human. A great psychologist once said that a human is a subject who lives and explores their own existence. Biologically, a human is a mammal in the primate family belonging to the genus Homo, an animal gifted with great intellect, capable of using language and symbols, while forming complex societies with various structures. But what would happen to humanity? If it lost its intelligence and all its cultural functions collapsed, it's hard to say they would still be human. The name for that kind of creature is zombie. All of this happened because of the rage virus. This explanation came from the hamburger, who wanted to know if everyone understood what had just happened. But the girls on the team still couldn't say what was going on. The warrior was a bit farther from the others, being targeted by several infected people. Our protagonist appeared to save her. He would not allow one of his companions to be overtaken by that virus. Using electricity as his chosen weapon, our protagonist struck all the creatures, causing their bodies infected by the virus to experience another kind of pain. After defeating those first infected people, our boy realized that the sensation of doing something like that felt really good. Looking back with full heroic flair, he asked if the girl was okay. But the warrior had tears in her eyes. She asked our protagonist if everyone was just a joke to him. As she approached him angrily, the boy began saying that she was starting to complain again, only to immediately receive a well-deserved slap across the face. He didn't understand what was going on, while his teammate asked once again if he was going insane. Since everything started happening, they had all nearly died multiple times because of our protagonist. In response, he said he had saved each of them every single time, but the girl, still furious, said they never should have been involved at all. While she was being burned by that suffocating heat, she screamed non-stop that she didn't want to die, not without seeing her parents one last time. She said our protagonist didn't know how terrifying that was and she didn't want to go through it again. All because of his stupid idea of fun, she just wanted the boy to go screw himself. Because in the end, they were all just tools for him to show off his abilities, and he does everything alone anyway. She asked if our protagonist even knew the meaning of the word companion. All he's done so far is beat people up, and she completely disagrees with that idea of fun. Our protagonist just said that's how it works in this kind of story, but upon hearing that, his teammate said it made no sense at all. If those people were infected by some kind of virus, there must be a way to cure them. At this point, she was already begging for our protagonist to save them all. I didn't really get it. I thought she was furious about the adventures, but in the end, she wanted to save the zombies. Continuing on, our protagonist seemed like he had something to say. He didn't believe his teammate thought he had killed those people. About that, he could guarantee there was a misunderstanding. All he did was paralyze them with electricity. They were all still alive, and as she herself said, there must be a cure. He also doesn't like main characters who destroy everything in their path, who get criticized for always doing the same thing. Every time he brings that up, his team just stares at him blankly, understandably, since they don't know how to break the fourth wall. The boy asked her not to worry, saying he wouldn't go that far in his actions, until she warned him about an infected approaching. When our boy noticed the presence, his shoulder had already been bitten. His teammate screamed in terror, while our protagonist shouted in pain, unable to understand what was happening. One of his abilities activated in emergency mode, launching several restraints at the infected, like a web. That's how he was neutralized, and our boy realized that had been risky. Since he'd been bitten, the warrior grew worried, thinking he might be infected, but our protagonist said it was nothing. One of his many abilities is called Splendid Healing, a good reason not to be concerned. But contrary to what he expected, the wounds seemed to be getting worse. Since traditional healing wasn't working, he decided to use a blessing ability. His attempts were in vain, he couldn't heal the wound, and the Constellation of Justice said there was no choice. The virus is a celestial power, which means the boy can't do anything. She needs to cut off his head before the infection takes over. Our protagonist was frightened by those words, until he realized he was actually getting very angry. With what little control he had over his body, he tried to signal justice and not to attack. Quite worried about his situation, he clung to the idea of being the main character, so that everything would make sense. He began thinking that the story must be getting bad because he's too strong, and this was a necessary plot twist to balance things out. Understanding all these truths, our protagonist went completely mad. His scream of rage echoed through the streets, reaching everyone's ears. With no other options, Justice was regretting what she had to do until the trap stopped her from attacking. She needs to return to normal one day, that's why our protagonist must live. The hamburger strongly supports those words, while she remains undecided if the zombies are getting out of control, until Justice asks for the path to be cleared, saying she needs to use her sword. At that moment, the trap asked if that was a challenge. Then the warrior, very reasonably, said there was no time for this. They needed to get to a safe place before things got worse. The human hamburger didn't know how to get through the people, but the warrior said it would be fine, asking if the Constellation of Justice could take them somewhere else, since it's possible that a safe place still exists. People throughout the region were infected, but the school in that city appeared to be abandoned. They decided to take our protagonist there. The trap asked for space, realizing that our protagonist seemed to be in a state of demonic delirium. She might be able to treat it with her acupuncture, and she immediately started jabbing needles into the boy's body, which caused him to vomit a massive amount of blood, somewhat unexpectedly. The human sandwich said that on top of everything else, it was ineffective. Justice said celestial powers can't be subdued that easily, until our protagonist said he felt great. The pressure in his head had vanished. Justice was left speechless by all of it, while the trap started bragging. He returned to his senses for only a short while, soon feeling himself growing furious again. And one of the things that irritates our protagonist is that the main character is tied up and unable to use his own abilities. He immediately closed his eyes to think, trying to find a way to understand the author's intentions, until he reached an epiphany. He'd found the solution. He told everyone he understood he knows how to overcome the challenge of this chapter. He's certain that in the next one, he's going to die. For anyone interested, we're starting chapter 11 now. Let's see if the boy dies. Somewhere else in the city, people were fighting off the infected. The girl was desperate. It was her group that promised to stay together, and one of them now had to stay behind. and the guy revealed he had been infected earlier, which is why he was making this sacrifice. Apologizing for his recklessness, he wished them all well. The boat left the port, leaving the girl even more heartbroken. All of this was being watched on a phone screen. It was a series and that episode had just ended. Our protagonist was the one watching it. He found the character's sacrifice very obvious, but still emotional. He decided he would give it the highest rating possible, making sure to leave a positive comment, just as anyone watching this video should. This kind of altruism isn't taught in schools. Stories that include the author's personal philosophy are far better than traditional education. The boy kept eating his instant noodles, reflecting on those words. Now he returned to his imprisoned state, saying that before transforming, he would sacrifice himself for everyone. The warrior didn't understand, and Justice didn't grasp the concept of sacrifice. The protagonist insisted that this is the destiny of the main character, and the dagger assassin didn't seem to understand his stance either. She wanted to know what exactly he'd be sacrificing for, since all of them were super powerful and could handle things on their own. Caught off guard, he didn't know what to say either, and the warrior quickly realized he was about to start stalling again. She told him they weren't useless people and could overcome this without his help. That's when our boy realized this wasn't a self-sacrifice and growth arc after all, especially because his group is so powerful that the infected are afraid of all of them. Since all of humanity had been infected, there was also no thrill in finding other survivors. They also agreed that they shouldn't kill any of those people. Taking all of that into account, he needed to understand the chapter's premise before losing control again, until a dreadful sound was heard. It was just the dagger assassin's stomach, and the trap commented that the girl was just hungry, since no one had eaten that day. The warrior took the opportunity to say she was also starving, even if the situation was so complicated. That's when everyone's attention turned to the hamburger lying on the table. Desperate, he tried to beg them not to do this to him. The trap said emergency food should sacrifice itself for the greater good, something he didn't want to do at all. Trying to find a way to survive, the human hamburger asked everyone to follow him. Just outside that room, the trap realized he was right. Several hamburger packages were scattered across the floor, enough for everyone to eat. That had happened earlier. It was our protagonist doing, and the warrior wanted to know how to eat them. She was taught how to open the packaging, but was very surprised to see so much food in that hallway. The dagger assassin was a bit concerned. She asked the human hamburger if she could eat his friends, which deeply offended him, since he was in fact a person. Ignoring the threat devastating the earth, they decided to stop and have a meal. The dagger assassin came from another world, and the trap was stuck in the perspective of rural China. It was their first time eating a sandwich, a blend of so many flavors that they were completely enchanted. While the others ate, Justice was asking our protagonist how he was feeling, and the boy thanked her for restraining him in that chair. She said it wasn't necessary and regretted taking him to that other dimension, because now he would suffer from wrath until the day he died. Feeling great agony in his body, the boy asked what he should do in that situation. That's when Justice said she wouldn't let him remain like that. What humans are suffering because of the constellations isn't fair, and she wants to do things the right way. Knowing her motivation, our boy felt a little more encouraged. Justice asked him to endure a bit longer. There must be a way to resolve this, and they have reliable companions for it. The girls had just entered the room very happy after eating, with clearly improved moods. Our protagonist and Justice were slightly lost in that situation, which ended up making our boy even more furious. Seeing his friends satisfied made him irritated. He lost control again, and Justice had to struggle to keep him restrained in the chair. But it seemed that what she was doing was useless. The trap said she needed to return to her original form. Since she had been transformed, her abilities hadn't been the same. It was very difficult to control her internal energy. And by beginning to use her powers, she noticed something different. She was sensing an energy, and it wasn't far from their location. It was from someone who hadn't been consumed by rage, which was surprising given Earth's current state. Justice said that was impossible, since the infection had spread to all living organisms, and her senses are never wrong. But the trap strongly disagreed because she had great faith in her own abilities. She was able to feel the exact location of that uninfected person, saying that if Justice paid attention, she'd be able to hear that person breathing. Justice decided to give what she heard a chance, and was immediately surprised by what she found, that presence of a normal person. That's when the dagger assassin asked if there were other survivors, only to be corrected by the warrior, who said the infected were still alive too. Justice felt that the person was getting closer and closer, but she couldn't understand it, and the dagger assassin said they couldn't hesitate, that person might be in danger. And right in front of them, our protagonist lost control once again, screaming with all his might. Justice said it was a power that rivaled cosmic existence. They needed to hurry, or the deviant would spiral out of control and destroy the Earth. She would stay behind to keep him restrained in the chair. The rest of the team would have to handle this on their own. After jumping out the window, the trap was heading toward this person while carrying the mascot in her arms. The dagger assassin and the warrior stayed behind, still a little concerned. The warrior wasn't sure if it was okay to go alone like that without any sort of plan. But to her surprise, the trap had many abilities, managing to walk through the air as if she were flying. The human hamburger didn't understand why he was being carried, and the trap said she brought him along because he understood this world very well and was easy to carry. Those words touched the hamburger's heart, making him feel needed for the first time. The trap descended to the ground as they were getting close to their destination. She could feel the peaceful energy of a person in that building, which surprised the hamburger. But while they stood there, infected were approaching them. What worried the hamburger was whether that peaceful person would open the door. After all, the world had changed. Before he could share more of his concerns, the trap passed through the infected as if they were nothing, forcing her way into the apartment by smashing the window. Now both of them were inside. The hamburger didn't know that entering like that was even a valid option. The apartment seemed empty, and the hamburger wasn't sure if someone was actually living there. That's when the trap said there was someone behind that door. She could hear their calm breathing. She gently forced the doorknob, and both were faced with a rather unexpected scene. The hamburger started to get nervous. He didn't know what that could be, but it was clearly the room of someone affiliated with webtoons. And if you look closely, there are some famous series represented here. The trap asked what all those talismans were. The hamburger said those objects weren't what she was thinking, but were equally strange. Under those covers was the person they were looking for. Manifesting energy in one of her hands, the trap was ready to act, but the hamburger asked her to wait a moment, and the girl under the covers sat up on her own. Apparently, she had just woken up. The poor hamburger had no natural defenses against pretty women appearing before him. He was immediately enchanted. The trap found that so pitiful that she threw him to the floor. Meanwhile, the new girl began to wonder what was going on. A talking hamburger and a martial artist. This kind of thing only happens in a manga. Her reaction was so unexpected that both the hamburger and the trap were speechless. This girl looked exactly like the deviant, and the girl went on, saying this felt just like a webtoon. She had just finished a chapter and our protagonist was wrong. He was still alive. Completely disappointed, the trap asked the hamburger if everyone in this country behaved this way. The girl believed she was dreaming, seeing that woman in front of her and the talking hamburger. Introducing herself, she said her name was Linera. The hamburger realized she was a student at the school, which surprised the girl. The trap asked if they knew each other, and the hamburger said the girl was quite famous. She even had her own nickname at school. He began to recall the days when everything was still normal. Nera was a student who used to sleep during class. The class rep had been assigned to deliver test papers, and couldn't believe what she was seeing. She had never seen Nera awake during a lesson, and she still scored top marks in everything. The #1 sleepyhead student, that's Nera. The hamburger was very upset. He couldn't believe she had slept through everything, even skipping school. That's when Nera said she really loved sleeping. Besides, it was a holiday that day, which made everything make sense to the hamburger. That's why the school had been empty. The one who was now flustered was the trap. Gates of hell had opened in the world, monsters emerged, and the girl had stayed asleep the entire time. After hearing all of that, Nera was even more impressed. It really did sound like a story, which made her seem even stranger to everyone. The trap didn't waste any time and picked her up, saying it was time to go. Nera was uncomfortable with that, but then accepted that it must all be a dream. Since the trap hadn't yet noticed how much she resembled the deviant, she felt confident that Nera might be useful. They sped out through the window, heading back to the school. On the way, Nera kept calling for help, clearly frightened, while the group was being watched by a mysterious figure, who found everything quite interesting. Looking through the window, the warrior realized the trap had already returned. As soon as she entered the school again, she said she had recovered the uninfected person and explained the situation to her along the way. Nera said her heart was racing, until she realized that everyone in that room was incredibly beautiful. The warrior is also a student at that school, and she quickly recognized the sleepy student. And the dagger assassin revealed that the depraved one's condition is getting much worse. Justice is still able to restrain him, but if the infection continues like this, their only option will be to sacrifice him. Nera felt a bit intimidated upon hearing them call that boy the depraved one. The sandwich asked if she knew him. Nera said yes, but that he might not remember. They were childhood friends, and it was the depraved one who introduced her to comic books. The girl still believes this is all just a dream, but it's a trap. She's wrong. The warrior didn't expect the depraved one and the sleepy student to be friends, and Justice asked why she wasn't affected by the virus. Nera quickly assumed this must be Justice, and that she had heard a lot about her on the way there. The hamburger was impressed by her mental agility, and the girl seems to have noticed other things too, assuming she's the owner of this dream while everyone keeps telling her that this is not a dream. The warrior assumed she was confused, but Nera said she's now sure it's a dream because her crush had appeared in it. A dream made just so the two of them could live it together. The male protagonist is out of control, and when no one knows what to do, the female protagonist shows up, and honestly, it's hard to disagree with her. The warrior struggled to believe that the depraved one had an admirer, but became worried when she saw Nora hugging our protagonist. She asked her to stop immediately, but Nera ignored her, now embracing the depraved one. Nera tried to tell him that everything was okay. He asked her to remember him. Justice called her a fool, saying this was dangerous and that she didn't know what she was doing since it wouldn't work. Ignoring their warnings, Nera pressed her fingers against her own eyes. She only did that to make her eyes tear up to be more convincing. The warrior saw that and is now certain the girl is just as crazy as the depraved one. Meanwhile, the tears rolled down her face, and one of those tears fell toward the protagonist, dripping onto his forehead like a raindrop, causing a completely inexplicable reaction in him. To Justice's surprise, who thought this could be impossible, it seems Nera's intervention is working. The trap can't make sense of what she's seeing now with her own eyes, while the hamburger feels like he's seen this before. Justice is certain this is absolutely unbelievable, and our protagonist, who is out of control, now seems to have finally calmed down. His eyes begin to open as if awakening from a deep sleep. Now he was completely freed from the rage he had been feeling. Nara told everyone this is the right way to bring the male protagonist of any story back to sanity, a sincere hug and the tears of an old friendship. The depraved one looked at her, trying to understand what had just happened, which left Nara embarrassed. She's now so shy she can barely speak. Our boy knows she's the sleepy student but doesn't understand why she's wearing pajamas. Only now did she realize she wasn't dressed appropriately, and because of her change in behavior, the dagger assassin got confused. More precisely, she seems jealous. Justice approached the depraved one, saying that girl was the one who cured him, and very curious, he asked how that happened, wanting to understand how a random girl was able to cure him without any kind of cosmic power. He only remembers the part about the teeters and the childhood friendship. Besides that, for it to work, Nara would have to like him and be in the role of the female protagonist. Stating that he's already drawing those weird conclusions, his team realized he was back to normal. In any case, the depraved one is very grateful for everything they did for him. Assuming Nara might be cold, he placed clothes over her. The girl still believes this is all a dream. Even so, she can't look him in the eyes, until she received an invitation from the depraved one to join his team as well, because they were in need of a smart addition to the team, and the depraved one has a feeling she'll be very useful. The one who's truly worried is Justice, because that girl was able to neutralize the power of a constellation. She might be much more dangerous than the depraved one. Now they can return to the main focus. Nara said this dream is far too detailed. She believes she must have watched too many movies before falling asleep. The warrior says once again that everything is real and the fate of the world is at risk. Finally, it seems Nara understood everything. Our boy wants to return to that constellation's dimension, but Justice warned that going back without a plan might lead to the same outcome. The depraved one doesn't know what to do. They haven't yet faced an opponent they couldn't defeat. That's when Nara asked them to explain the situation to her, as she doesn't know what's going on. This seemed to give our protagonist an idea, since that girl is very intelligent. He said he would explain everything to her, hoping Nara might be able to suggest a strategy. A few minutes passed during the explanation. Once she was aware of everything, the group returned to that constellation's dimension. The enraged man seemed to be waiting for all of them, saying he was impressed they had the courage to return there, noticing that the number of people had increased. Our protagonist said that thanks to that entity, he had already had his fill of frustration in life. He was done with it. His confidence seemed to make the entity even more furious. Succumbing to his own rage, the constellation charged our protagonist in fury, ready to strike him. The blow was just about to land on our boy's face, but he didn't move, showing a subtle smile as it all happened. A powerful shockwave spread across the entire dimension. The trap had to create a protective barrier to shield her companions, and for the first time since they met, the entity's eyes appeared intrigued. His blow had struck a powerful shield. He hadn't been able to touch the depraved one. All of that had been done by Justice, who was actively protecting the boy. That's when the depraved one said that attention would spike once again, leaving the constellation of Wrath deeply enraged. Aware of Justice's intervention, the Herald of Wrath asked what she was doing, trying to take down an auxiliary constellation with these insects. Justice said that's not what's happening. She came there to protect him. But in that constellation's mind, none of this made sense, which only made him even angrier, unleashing more attacks toward our protagonist. With Justice's protection, the depraved one believed he might actually stand a chance of defeating that constellation, who seemed to enjoy the challenge that had presented itself. Before attacking this time, he began accumulating his power, which was gathering in the pendant around his neck. Our protagonist realized that was the trigger for his second phase. This had happened before, and last time the depraved one got thoroughly beaten. The Herald of Wrath wanted to know if the boy truly believed he could match the power of a constellation, because he should have been preparing to match the power of Wrath itself, not just of a constellation. After that generic speech, he struck with much greater force, forcing our boy to actually defend himself. The dimension they were in was ravaged by Wrath, and the force of that strike echoed through space, throwing the depraved one's body beyond the atmosphere. Not even Justice's defense could stop it. Looking back, she was able to see the path of destruction left by the blow. She hadn't known the Herald of Wrath was that powerful, capable of destroying her barrier. The man revealed he hadn't gotten stronger, and asked the insects before him if they believed he had been holding back his rage this whole time. Living an entire life had kept him from enjoying many things. He ended up ruining or breaking everything. And there was one thing that angered him more than anything else. He hated his own rage, and it was his responsibility to try to control all that emotion. That's why he had been storing the wrath he felt in that artifact, the pendant around his neck, for countless eras. And now it was time to release all that accumulated fury. His body was enveloped by immense power. The constellation was truly under threat now. The protagonist group watched with concern, but if you look closely, the trap seems to be enjoying it. Several beasts forged from the magma of that planet began to materialize. The Herald of Wrath was finally ready to unleash everything he had, ordering the newly formed creatures to end the lives of those insects. Far from there, our boy believed in the potential of his companions, and he was using the first phase of his ascension. He hadn't wanted to use this ability so as not to overwork the illustrator, but he would use the replication ability, causing several units of himself to appear in space. The Herald of Wrath was enjoying the battle, saying the insects could try as much as they wanted. Since everyone is at risk of extinction this time, Justice won't go easy, and she's already defeated the first creature. But they quickly reconstitute using the planet's magma. Realizing that no matter how many of them she cuts down with her blade, they'll keep reappearing, Nara said the plan had already fallen apart. They needed to return immediately, but Justice kept fighting. She knew she had to go back, but there would be no one left to protect them. She hadn't expected the Herald of Wrath to have that kind of power. It was her fault for not knowing all this information. To correct her mistake, she needed to take a stand in that battle, using her sword to repel the creatures trying to attack her companions, pushing her abilities as the constellation of Justice to their limit. But the creatures kept appearing, until one of them emerged behind her. That's when Justice realized there wouldn't be time to react. Except the attack was interrupted by an even bigger creature, a dragon made of purple energy. That was the work of the trap, who was also in the battle. She wouldn't allow Justice to bear the burden of protecting everyone alone. That was when the celestial entity realized she wasn't alone. Those enemies were created by a constellation, and in response to Justice's fear, the dagger assassins said they could fight too. Each of them had received a portion of the depraved one's power. They had a chance. Justice was impressed that these life forms had such a strong will to keep living, acknowledging that the Herald of Wrath was wrong. Humanity is not what they thought it was. It is in fact one of the noblest forms of life to exist, and Justice granted her protection to those people. Our protagonist, on the other hand, continued being used as a punching bag. The Herald of Wrath said he wouldn't be able to hide for much longer. He exploded all the replicas with a solar blast. Even though the main body was far away, the depraved one realized just how dangerous that was, until he was finally reached by the Herald of Wrath, who wondered why the protagonist hadn't attacked him, struggling to speak as his throat was being crushed. Our boy revealed that he has no intention of fighting him. These words left the constellation completely confused. The depraved one said constellations can't die, so fighting is pointless. That's why he's going to make this constellation his companion too. Moments earlier, they had been planning a strategy against that constellation. After hearing everything, Justice realized it made a lot of sense. Nara agreed that it was a very good plan and wanted to hear what the others thought. Trap said they'd be facing a cosmic entity, and the hamburger replied that Justice was one too. Only the depraved one's opinion was left. He didn't agree with the strategy. The warrior asked why he disagreed, and the boy began to explain. But turning that person into their companion would just make everything even weirder. They're already not used to the characters who've joined the group. Adding another one would only make things more chaotic. And readers are expecting a battle that will burn through the entire illustration budget. But whenever he brings up that kind of thing, it just gets weirder. After thinking it over, Trap also disagreed with the plan, since the enemy is a cruel monster that wants to wipe out humanity. She would only feel satisfied after taking him down with her own hands, but someone said that won't happen. Justice said that humans could never destroy a constellation. The dagger assassins suggested that Justice fight in their place, but she said that battles between constellations are forbidden. However, if the plan is to make him an ally, she promised to lend her strength. Our protagonist still opposes the idea, and Nara said that if he has a better idea, he should share it. The boy gathered all his brain power to try and come up with a plan, recognizing that maybe there's no other choice. Now he wants to know everything Justice knows about the Herald of Wrath. Returning to the present moment, our protagonist said he would make him an ally. Before he could continue with his plan, he was struck once more by the man's hand. But the boy used a mirage skill, dodging it. He said he knows that the Herald of Wrath is invited by all the other constellations. And the man began to recall things he'd heard, that he was the brightest star of all, and that very soon he could have become a constellation. The only problem was his innate nature. Because he angered easily, he ended up being pushed away from others. That kind of thing only made him more upset. The King of Constellations said he admired the boy's consistency, naming him the Constellation of Wrath, hoping he could fulfill his purpose in the natural order of things. It was the first time he ever felt recognized for something. Feeling something good for the first time in his life only made him even angrier. Our protagonist said that ever since then, he must have been working as a constellation in silence. Furious, the Herald of Wrath didn't like being understood by an insect. The depraved one healed his wounds while the constellation was venting his accumulated fury, asking what he thought about having an ally who doesn't break and who doesn't fall to pieces. That proposal genuinely shook the constellation, but the depraved one was hoping his strategy was working, because he was already at his limit. It was the first time the Constellation of Wrath had ever heard words like those, and now he would see if that insect could truly avoid falling to pieces. While being held in the constellation's hands, the depraved one realized the situation was extremely dangerous. He was definitely going to die if something went wrong. That was when our boy realized he had actually thought he might die, and a massive explosion occurred, like stars colliding in space. Below them, the protagonist's team continued fighting the creatures. The dagger assassin was already exhausted, and she seemed to notice something. They all looked up, witnessing with their own eyes the explosion caused by the Constellation of Wrath. It had been a long time since the Herald of Wrath had released so much fury all at once, and it truly gave him a refreshing sensation. The depraved one said there was no need to thank him for what he had done. The Constellation of Wrath was astonished to hear that the boy was still alive. It was hard to understand how he had survived that explosion, and our boy realized it was the plot armor, worn by the protagonist himself. Then he told the Constellation that he was perfectly fine, and that deep in his heart, he knew he was a good person. The Constellation said the boy spoke as if he could truly understand, and the boy asked if he really spread the virus with the purpose of exterminating humanity. But after seeing everything with his own eyes, he saw that people were just upset. They weren't hurting each other, until those who weren't infected were attacked too, and the depraved one became infected. That was when he finally understood everything that was happening, and the source of the virus was the despair the Constellation felt from wanting to find someone who could understand his frustration. He had been doing this alone for so long, and now all of humanity knew what he had gone through. The depraved one acknowledged it must have been a very difficult time. He had blamed himself on other occasions because of his personality traits. traits. He wanted to better understand why he was that way. It would be very hard to have a normal life. He felt like he needed to change, but that wasn't an easy task. Until he realized it wasn't worth wasting time with that kind of thinking alone. Recognizing in himself empathy, and that he had already gone through many hardships in life. Now the constellation could have friends who would acknowledge the work he had done so far. That's why he wanted them to be companions. After being hit with the power of that speech, the constellation of Wrath was left speechless. He never thought he would feel this way in his life. That made him feel very angry, and he prepared to strike immediately. The depraved one closed his eyes, ready to receive it. He was struck hard by the Herald of Wrath, who said he didn't need that kind of thing. Releasing the rage he felt, he began to strike the boy's body over and over, determined to crush that insect, sending him falling to the ground like a meteor. Justice was extremely worried about the depraved one's condition, since behind him was a furious constellation, who hadn't liked the way he had been made to feel. While Justice pleaded for him to stop, the dagger assassin was also worried, until the constellation finally realized something. He wasn't able to stay angry about the situation. Nero went to the depraved one to treat his wounds, while he said this was a very classic scene. Justice asked the constellation to look around. He did as she asked. His eyes were immediately surprised by everything in that scene. The planet that had once been ruled by fire had become a place of peace. He never imagined that place could ever be cold, and the depraved one wanted to know his answer, whether the constellation would join them on this journey. The man had to look up at the sky once more, admiring the beauty of that place, until he finally decided to accept the invitation. Approaching him, the depraved one said this was the right choice, but he didn't know what the future would hold for them. That's why he was counting on his help. But as soon as he touched the body of that constellation, he felt something very cold, and the man said he might not be able to join them. Justice realized what was happening and couldn't believe it was even possible. Constellations cease to exist when they lose the reason for their existence. Now that he has no target for his rage, he's disappearing. Before that happened, he wanted the depraved one to receive that necklace. It was his artifact, the Amulet of Wrath, which had stored that emotion for many eras. The constellation believed it would be useful for the journey ahead, but the depraved one insisted that he come with them. His body was slowly fading, and the constellation apologized for having called his companion an insect. He had finally formed an unbreakable bond with someone, only to vanish shortly after. That made him very angry. Then the constellation disappeared, leaving all of them alone in that dimension. That's when the blade of Justice approached the depraved one's neck. He dodged it without understanding what was happening, while Justice said she could not allow him to live. The disappearance of a constellation is an omen of the collapse of the order of the universe. The boy is a massive threat. Trap and Nero tried to stop it, begging Justice to wait, but the woman already had her sword ready, apologizing for what she was about to do. The depraved one realized things could get complicated. That's when a mysterious person appeared in that place, holding Justice's sword with just one finger. Justice knew who this person was. It was the constellation of Fun, who had now joined them. Our protagonist was surprised by this appearance, which seemed extremely cartoonish. Justice began to ask what he was doing there, and the constellation of Fun asked everyone to calm down and listen to what he had to say. He couldn't believe the depraved one actually tried to make Wrath his ally. He congratulated him for obtaining that artifact. But something more important was underway, a royal decree from the king of all constellations, and it was best that these people knew what it contained. They should prepare for that person's divine ceremony. Justice seemed very surprised by the news, and the warrior, like us, had no idea what this divine ceremony could be. In short, said the constellation of Fun, the depraved one was going to become one too. But he didn't seem happy to hear that, saying that constellations treat humans like ingredients in their recipes. Just a short while ago, they were nearly wiped out. The constellation of Fun asked him to calm down a bit, saying not all constellations agree with such things. Indeed, humans had been chosen, which was strange, and he asked if the depraved one really wanted to reject the offer, something the boy did promptly. He remained firm in his words. The constellation of Fun had already expected him to do something like that, revealing that he had been watching for a while, transcendent being who values fun above all else. There was no way he could ignore something like this. Not just him. Other constellations were also very interested in the actions of that human, especially after what happened with the constellation of Wrath. Our protagonist didn't like how close he had gotten, and the constellation apologized, said he was glad the boy was committed to having fun. He said he would try to work things out with the king of the constellations, saying the boy had refused the invitation, but he hoped the boy was ready, because now all the constellations had become his enemies, as well as the 12 zodiac houses. The depraved one was intrigued by the 12 houses, and Fun explained that among the countless constellations, there are stars that shine brighter than the others, chosen by the king himself, the 12 most advanced of all. Each of them possesses enough power to wipe out all life in the universe. And now the depraved one had made enemies of 12 of them. Just imagining that situation was terrifying. But Fun noticed that one of the 12 zodiac houses might have to be excluded, because Justice seemed to have chosen to take his side. That's when the depraved one asked if Justice was one of the 12 houses, and she confirmed her identity. Before receiving the title of Justice, she was known as the House of Libra, the 7th house of the zodiac, revealing the mark on her face. The boy had no idea he had been walking beside someone so incredible, and asked if all zodiac members had that kind of mark. Fun confirmed that yes, they all do. But they changed depending on the house, and turning to Justice, Fun said she might lose her position. The woman revealed that it didn't matter, as she valued the maintenance of the universe's order and would willingly give her position to someone worthy. Fun realized he couldn't even make jokes in that place, everything was taken too seriously. And the depraved one wanted to know if he still had something to say, so the constellation began to think. He said they were very similar. They both loved to have fun, and he wanted to be entertained now, because he would have done the same for a boy. But someone else had gotten excited in that situation and was overflowing with power, eager for a worthy opponent. Trap launched an attack, determined to eradicate that constellation. Fun said the words used against him were very harsh, and that could be frightening. Trap was already dangerously close, her attack ready, but the constellation made just one gesture with his hand. The depraved one realized this could be dangerous, as the constellation of Fun told him he would show how it should be done, with a single movement of his fingers. That was enough to stop Trap's attack, showing that this constellation also possesses great power, capable of erasing an entire planet, causing a massive explosion. Justice had to immediately use her teleportation ability to get everyone out of that place. Everyone was successfully evacuated, but the depraved one was concerned. Justice said Trap could have died from that, but she admitted it might have been a Fun death, facing a stronger opponent. Suddenly appearing beside them, the constellation of Fun agreed with those words. He also asked where everyone was going in such a rush. As he'd expected, humans could be very interesting. Seeing that our protagonist was angry, he asked why, after all, he had saved his life earlier. That was when the depraved one realized he had almost died fighting the constellation of Wrath, but for some unknown reason, nothing had happened. And the constellation said that as long as he protected Fun, he would be protected by him, ensuring they wouldn't be attacked by all the other constellations at once, because he is Fun, and he is also the House of Capricorn. He had one more thing to share, but decided that only the depraved one would be allowed to hear it, whispering it close to his ear. He asked the boy if he didn't think that was fun, revealing that he had high expectations for him, handing him something. If he ever wanted to play again, he only needed to use that flute. Finally, Fun said goodbye to all of them, leaving behind a very confused depraved one. They were finally arriving on Earth. Our protagonist group was once again filled with uncertainty, but they weren't used to that kind of travel, which always made them very nauseous. Everything was happening so fast in the story that the depraved one hadn't even had time to grieve the previous scene. Approaching him, Justice apologized for having tried to attack him with her sword. He said there was no need to worry about that, but the woman knew he was going through a lot. She had been arrogant in judging him, saying she would return to the Temple of the Constellations to receive instructions from the king. Trap also wanted to return to normal because she needed to train. Nero approached the depraved one, asking what he was going to do now. Before he could say what he'd do, a hamburger asked everyone to look in a certain direction. They immediately did so, realizing that life had returned to normal on Earth. There were several workers on the street repairing the damage caused by the monsters, while injured people were being cared for. The rage infection had truly vanished, and the hamburger realized the depraved one had saved the world. Our boy finally grasped the scale of his actions. That group could finally be disbanded. The hamburger was caught off guard when the boy said everyone could return to their normal lives. Despite the title he carried, the depraved one hadn't managed to do much alone, and the hamburger wanted to know what title he was talking about. The depraved one said that from now on he would do things on his own, which made the dagger assassin very worried. Then he opened his system window, impressing the hamburger. He received a message confirming that he had completed that mission, but our boy was alarmed because the hamburger could see it too. Returning to the system, he began complaining because he refuses to read messages with more than 4 lines. The message had been shortened. He was being penalized for participating in the eradication of the constellation of Wrath. The depraved one hadn't expected something like this. After being notified, the depraved one began to ask what kind of penalty it was and why he would suffer from it. He began to think he might lose his powers or be imprisoned in some kind of space prison, or worse, that new gates would open on Earth. The system said that he and his companions are now under supervision, cannot block the constellations, and must participate in their trials. A much lighter penalty than expected, and everyone gathered behind him to read it. Very surprised, the depraved one hadn't imagined his companions could read it too. Nara was startled when she realized she was also a member of that team, a fact that was immediately confirmed by the system. Our boy said he would take responsibility and face the challenges alone. His friends didn't need to suffer too, until the system got annoyed, telling him to stop being ridiculous. Thanks to the boy, it's having issues with the constellations, and it's not his servant, and it's tired of his laziness when it comes to reading messages longer than 4 lines. After that verbal beatdown, the system started to feel a little better. Justice approached to ask a question. She wanted to know if she could also participate in the trials of the other constellations. The system said it applied to her too, and asked if she was already feeling regret, which made her irritated. And for having overcome the challenge of the constellation of Wrath, the depraved one would receive a reward. After all of this, at least one good piece of news. And finally, the system screen disappeared, leaving only the protagonist's companions, who were furious and wanted answers immediately. Trying to apologize to everyone, he told them not to split up. He needed all of them together. Trap was already tired of this, considering ending his life personally, while the assassin tried to calm her down. Justice realized the situation was very complicated. They didn't know when the next challenge would come, so they couldn't be separated. Meanwhile, the hamburger cried, imagining his life was ruined. It was the warrior's turn to speak. She asked everyone to listen. What she wanted most now was to see her parents because she was very worried about them. While being comforted by the assassin, Nara suggested they go to her house first. The depraved one quickly remembered that he had thought of his own parents at the beginning of it all, but hadn't thought about anyone else's family, so he agreed to go to hers. As soon as the girl entered her home, she came across her mother, who looked very worried about her absence. Soon after, her companions appeared at the door too, asking for permission to come in, while the girl's mother called for her husband. Her father also looked very concerned. He asked if, during all that chaos, these people had kept his daughter safe. Our protagonist took a moment to respond. He said yes, but his companions knew that was only half the truth, since he was also the cause of the problems. Even so, the warrior's father sincerely thanked him, which gave the depraved one a real sense of accomplishment. After several minutes, the whole story was told to them too. The father said it was hard to believe, but they had seen it with their own eyes. They realized the boy had saved humanity. He was happy that his daughter had a friend as incredible as the depraved one. The boy hadn't seen himself that way before, and in the other room, the warrior was giving out some clothes. Nara was now much better dressed, thanks to the warrior's intervention. The assassin was impressed by the fabric quality of this era, while Justice still didn't understand the concept of human clothing. The poor hamburger was practically losing his mind, while our protagonist was wondering if the clothes he had made were really that bad, until the warrior asked if Trap was happy with the clothes she was wearing, responding that she would prefer a slow death over having to wear that kind of outfit, reminding everyone in case they've forgotten that she's actually a he. The warrior's mother had prepared a meal for everyone and called her daughter to help take the dish out of the oven, something she did with excellent mastery and skill, leaving the boys impressed. The human hamburger didn't know she could do that. After going through so much stress, everyone was enjoying a peaceful moment. The dining table was being set to welcome them all. They hadn't expected so many guests, but managed to prepare a proper banquet. With the food served, everyone was seated, ready to enjoy the meal. While some were more familiar with everything, Trap didn't know what those utensils were for. The depraved one was enchanted by the food, while the warrior's father thought he would love to have him as a son-in-law. Poor guy, so innocent. The warrior's mother said it was lasagna, her daughter's favorite recipe, and the daughter made sure to say she didn't cook it especially for them. Trap was already won over by the recipe, saying that the warrior could become a professional chef. Nara realized that this woman was the perfect definition of Mitsundir, and indeed, the warrior had once considered becoming a professional chef when she was younger. The depraved one hadn't imagined she was that kind of character. Everyone was eating happily, while the human hamburger watched from a distance, thinking that food probably tastes even better when enjoyed in good company. Finally, the food was gone. Everyone had eaten very well. The depraved one praised the warrior's mother's culinary skills. She was very grateful for the compliment, until someone said it was a little salty for their taste, surprising everyone there. Justice and the depraved one were startled. They hadn't noticed that person's presence. That woman was the constellation of cuisine, and despite the criticism, she liked what she had tasted. The depraved one asked why she appeared in that place, and she said the answer was obvious. She came to show him the spicy flavor of trials. Thinking a fight might break out there, the depraved one told his future father-in-law to hide, but that constellation said she wasn't primitive like the others. She was always curious about new flavors and already had a challenge for the protagonist's team. They would have to cook something delicious, capable of satisfying her. The ingredients would need to be found and cooked by them. The depraved one wondered why he should do what she said, and the constellation replied that everyone there should consider themselves very lucky. If it hadn't been for the suggestion of the constellation of fun, humanity would have already been wiped out. Knowing this, the depraved one began to suspect that the constellation of fun might be plotting something, while the constellation of cuisine said that if they failed, the end would be inevitable. They would have 1 week to prepare, and once ready, they should summon her through the system. And just as she appeared there, she vanished. The warrior's mother was very confused. She didn't know what had just happened, and her daughter realized they would have to cook something for aliens. If they failed, humanity would be doomed. The depraved one started to worry. He didn't know how to cook well, and had no idea how to use his powers in that situation. That's when he began thinking about his companions. He told the warrior's parents they would be heading out again, and the man realized they were going to save the world once more. Very excited, he said he was counting on the depraved one to secure his daughter's future, which left her shocked to hear such words. Once outside, they gathered to discuss the plan. The depraved one asked if they remembered the first time when he summoned the assassin. The warrior still remembered that event vaguely. Back then, he summoned someone who could adapt to their dimension's conditions, and now he would do something different. Stating that his ability was already in progress, the warrior wondered what he was really planning to do, and the depraved one confirmed they were going to the dimension with the most delicious ingredients across all time and space, transporting them to a place that matched the conditions set by his skill. The depraved one stood on a grassy field, gazing toward the aligned horizon. Trap asked him where they had been sent this time, and the little hamburger realized that this could be a bit dangerous. The protagonist's team was now overshadowed by massive figures. Before them stood a very dangerous dragon. A new journey had begun. The menacing creature began roaring at the group, who remained united nonetheless. Nara was still the only one scared in these situations, while the others were already used to monsters. The threat from the creature was about to become real as it prepared to unleash flames. launching a devastating attack directly at the protagonist's team. The depraved one realized he'd always end up having to handle complex situations. With his protective barrier, he managed to block the creature's attack. Now it was time to return the favor. He struck the dragon with an attack from his fingers. The result was absolutely devastating. Because he hadn't controlled his strength, there was no dragon left to use. Trying to fix his mistake, he used his ability to reverse time. Back to the moment when the dragon was still alive. Considering the possibilities, the depraved one thought about taming the creature. Realizing what had happened, the dragon asked the protagonist to wait a moment and be reasonable. Transforming before their eyes, it assumed a human form. Its eyes were serious and deep, and it asked to be spared. The hamburger noticed that the man's expression didn't match the words he had just spoken. His name is Takasos, and he is already the 14th generation of protectors of this forest. Thus, he knows these people came from another world. As they seemed dangerous, he had to attack and apologize for it. The pervert wasn't expecting something so anticlimactic, and the dragon asked if, with all that power, he was supposed to be the hero. That narrative was immediately confirmed by the boy, imagining that anyone could see he was destined to be the hero. The dragon was surprised, wondering if he might be the child of the prophecy. It all happened 5,000 years ago, if he chooses to believe it. A story from within the realm of dragons. 5 days after the eclipse of the 2 moons, 7 strangers will appear through a pillar of light. But after counting them, the dragon realized there were only 6 people. He clearly ignored the hamburger, while the pervert assumed they would have to defeat some kind of demon king. This surprised the dragon, as those strangers seemed to know the content of the prophecy. Skipping that boring part, our boy asked the dragon to tell him what the most delicious food in this world was. Such an abrupt change of topic left the dragon unsure of how to respond. After a long explanation, they discovered that this continent is called Ogiogunia, and it holds 4 great delicacies. A legendary flower that blooms once every 1,000 years, capable of increasing vitality and life expectancy by 10 years. There's also the lava sea urchin, which once sparked great wars in the past. Dragon eggs, considered the supreme ingredient by many. And finally, the meat of the paradise rabbit. These are the 4 great delicacies of this land. Knowing he was speaking to a dragon, the pervert asked if he could lay some eggs, and the man said that was very rude. Then the pervert suggested summoning all of them to that place at once. He immediately used his ability to make those items appear there, and the dragon tried to stop him. He asked him not to do it under any circumstances, and the pervert asked what the risk of doing so would be. He explained that the lava urchin lives beneath the demon king's castle under immense pressure. Bringing a creature like that here would cause an instant explosion. The pervert asked about the other ingredients, and the dragon said they weren't rare without reason. The flower won't bloom for another 30 years, the rabbits were already extinct, and he would never hand over the eggs of his own kind to those people. After that outburst, the pervert tried to calm the man down, saying he no longer understood why they wanted those ingredients, as he thought they were supposed to be heroes. The pervert said he would try to save the world in his own way, not expecting the dragon to understand, even though he appreciated the dragon's help, which left the dragon deep in thought. He had to sigh deeply to make sense of his own thoughts. If they truly are the people from the prophecy, it is his duty as a dragon to help them fulfill it. He asked them to try to obtain the millennial flower and the lava sea urchin. When they find the tree that holds these flowers, they might get help from the elves. As for the lava sea urchin, they'll need to look beneath the demon king's castle, and they will certainly encounter his army during the search. What with the strength they possess, that might be easy, so he suggested they try to find them first. Our protagonist decided to split his team in 2 to speed up the process. Nara, very intrigued, asked which team the protagonist would join. Creating a copy of himself, he confirmed he would be in both teams, a technique so impressive it left the dragon amazed. Now they are ready to carry out this task. Those heading to the tree are the pervert, the warrior, the assassin, Nara, and the dragon, while the Demon King Castle team includes the pervert, the human hamburger, trap, and justice. While heading toward the elf forest, the pervert asked why the dragon wasn't at the Demon King's castle. Revealing that this enemy is truly terrifying, our protagonist noticed that the man had no facial expressions. They finally arrive at their destination, the city of the elves, which guards the world tree. This place is called Sylvan Heel. Nara is impressed by the city, which is very beautiful, while the pervert is imagining that this is the famous tree inspired by Norse mythology. As soon as he finished speaking, he noticed several arrows flying toward him. He managed to block all of them easily, but his companions were frightened. An elf said that humans are full of tricks, and that it was brave of them to come to that place, stating that they wouldn't make it out alive. The dragon tried to ask Beldur to stop, while the pervert noticed that the village operated under a kind of neighborhood watch. That's when the elf realized he was speaking to the guardian dragon of the forest, who went on to say that the child behind him is the one from the prophecy. The elves were alarmed. They were struggling to believe that a human could be the person from the prophecy. Our protagonist was already upset to see humans being reduced to nothing, and the elf continued his insult, saying it was a pathetic race, and the dragon was surely mistaken. Until the pervert asked if they already knew each other, and the dragon said Beldur was the prince of that people and captain of the guard. Holding the highest decision-making power among them, they would need to convince him somehow, but his personality was complicated. Beldur said humans were filthy and stupid, but as soon as he approached that group, his eyes caught sight of something interesting. He was completely lost in the assassin's beauty, and the elf who had been so arrogant before had now become a slave to his own passion. The protagonist's second group had arrived at the Demon King's castle. Before that gate, the pervert felt the atmosphere was very intense. His heart was racing. Those unexpected visitors were already being watched. The Demon King found it all very interesting. Back in the forest, the pervert's team was being warmly received and enjoying a meal that seemed very delicious. They were very grateful for the hospitality, but the pervert wasn't impressed by the dessert. The assassin was really enjoying everything she was tasting, and the elf patiently explained the fruits to her. The dragon was impressed by such hospitality. He was sure this moment would be recorded in history. Taking the assassin's hands, the elf promised he would help her fulfill the prophecy, no matter what. The pervert immediately stepped between them, thanking the elf for his words while shaking his hand very firmly, revealing that they had come to obtain the millennial flower. The elf was already annoyed, asking the pervert to remove his filthy hands from him. As our protagonist began to get irritated by the situation, Nera tried to calm him down, and the prince revealed that they had no remaining flowers. The next one would bloom in 30 years, until the assassin asked if there really wasn't a single flower left. That's when our boy realized that by intervening with the world tree, it might be possible. That sentence immediately made all the elves very aggressive, forcing the dragon to intervene once more, asking them to lower their weapons. He warned the humans that all of that was sacred to the elves, so they should be mindful of what they say. The pervert apologized, revealing that without those flowers, their world would be doomed. The prince already doubted whether he was really the hero of the prophecy, and the assassin asked kindly, asking him if there was no other way. Now other elves were completely enchanted by her beauty, forcing the prince to try to compose himself, telling her that the wisest among them, who was also the eldest, might know something. As soon as they met this figure, the old man revealed that the flowers no longer existed. It had been 1,000 years since they last bloomed. It was practically impossible to find any left. He recommended they be patient for the next 30 years. If they survived until then, they could see the flowers. For our protagonist, that's an impossible deadline. They have a maximum of 1 week. The old man said he once drank a tea made with the petals of that flower when he was young, and could still remember the taste as if he had tried it yesterday. Something truly divine. It was as if the forest itself had blessed him personally. The stored flowers were incredible too, and the fresh ones must be even better. Right after that, the old man began boasting to the humans, saying he had tasted it, which made the protagonist's team doubt whether he was really the wisest one. And the old man went on, telling them not to approach the tree as they still didn't know if they were the chosen ones. The staff he carried was made from a branch of the world tree. They should look at it closely, because in the next 30 years, they might have another opportunity. The one who felt proud of all of this was the prince, realizing that his master still understood a lot about racial prejudice. And the old man kept being impertinent, showing his staff to our protagonist. That's when a boy took the staff from his hands. The prince was furious at this behavior, while the warrior said he shouldn't have done that. But with that piece of wood in hand, the pervert was using his ability of uncontrollable growth, and what was once a staff had now transformed into a full-grown tree, leaving everyone who witnessed it completely astonished. Since the elves loved that tree so much, our protagonist decided to offer a second one as a gift. The old races had no idea how that was even possible, and the boy wanted to confirm whether it really bloomed once every 1,000 years, noticing there were several flowers on that new tree. More flowers than they could even count. Finally, the pervert was recognized by everyone as the hero of the prophecy. He had sped up time inside the Tower of Challenge. 1,000 years for that tree was a minor feat. The old man was on his knees, witnessing a legendary event. Even the racist captain was left speechless. They had all witnessed a miracle, something only the gods could do. At that moment, our protagonist began to wonder how the other team was doing. A fierce battle was underway. Even the human hamburger had been recruited. The demonic creature had a hole in its chest. It had been defeated by something it couldn't even describe, while the hamburger disappointingly said the creature was too weak. As the sandwich boasted, our protagonist agreed it was actually pretty cool. Justice and Trap watched it all, feeling deep secondhand embarrassment. The gates of the castle finally opened. A demon general was on the other side, saying that his guard was strong enough to defeat 10 dragons alone. He was truly impressed with these visitors. He was one of the 4 generals. He explained that the one they defeated was the weakest among them, while our protagonist said the hamburger was the weakest on their team. The general was caught off guard. He hadn't expected to hear the same words back at him, and he wanted to know if the boy would stay confident in front of him. But the pervert had already realized that he'd been frustrated and humiliated. Trap sensed that something fun might happen and volunteered to fight, asking the others to go ahead. This gave the protagonist chills. He ordered her not to say such words so casually, as that was the same as a death sentence. The general called them all fools, that they were ignoring his presence in that place. He immediately began attacking the protagonist group, but the attack was blocked by Trap. She had realized there was no need to worry about her companions. The general had been defeated. They hoped the Demon King would be a slightly bigger challenge. Once inside, they noticed the interior was very dark. The pervert asked if the next general was already waiting, until he started hearing a very strange sound. A person rattling chains said she was grateful to meet them, saying they had made it all the way to the Demon King's castle, but this was the farthest they would go. She was the scythe of chains, but before her face could even be drawn, Trap erased her from existence, revealing she was already tired of running into such weak opponents. It was also boring that she was dying of boredom. The same could be said for Justice, who was having an existential crisis from encountering so many life forms created by constellations. That's when the pervert realized that only cosmic entities could truly challenge their group, until a new voice appeared, asking if he really believed that. The protagonist noticed something was wrong. The girl who had been defeated was now standing again, as were the 2 demon generals who had already been taken down. A masked demon said that this was his power. He was the most powerful of the 4 generals, master of an army of the dead. Ordering the humans to kneel before his power, the hamburger asked if that was some kind of magic trick because it looked really ugly. Using more than one ability at once, the pervert recognized this as a problem that needed to be solved. And against that general, he used dimensional banishment, an ability also being used on each of his newly revived minions. It didn't take long for the general to start begging for mercy, and the pervert wished that they would find peace in the void. Now he believed they could go straight for the lava sea urchin. After all, that was the reason they had come to this castle. After walking a bit, the pervert felt bored as they hadn't reached their destination, until they ended up running into the Demon King himself. Very enthusiastic, he suggested ending the enemy quickly, but Justice noticed something. She asked for companions to wait, and she was already armored up. While the demon ordered everyone to kneel in his presence, the crushing pressure forced them to their knees, except for Justice, who managed to resist. Feeling that power, the pervert asked what it could be. Meanwhile, Justice felt a sense of familiarity, asking what she was doing in that place. The entity said the answer was very obvious. That was her castle, so of course she was there. This is the constellation of war. Before they entered the Demon King's castle, the dragon was about to explain what the generals were like. The pervert interrupted the explanation, saying it would ruin all the fun, and the hamburger assumed the dragon must be impressed by the behavior of this hero. So the dragon summarized his advice in one sentence. The Demon King is truly very strong. For thousands of years, countless heroes had appeared to try to defeat him, but all of them ended in disgrace. None even came close to victory. Although he is extremely powerful, he never attacked the human domain, a behavior expected by our protagonist, who was already very confident, believing he'll manage to overcome this somehow. But back in the present, he's now facing a very powerful enemy, and asked Justice if she knew that person. She said this is the constellation of war, one of the most powerful beings, who holds a position among the 12 of the zodiac. It is because of him that fights between constellations are permanently forbidden, which led the pervert to ask why he was acting as the Demon King in this situation. The constellation of war realized he wanted to know the reason. The answer was simpler than expected. He simply likes war. Due to the decision of the Constellation Council, he cannot engage directly in conflicts, so he had to come up with another solution, creating a planet where countless factions remain in perpetual conflict. He observes the life forms he created warring among themselves, something that brings him great satisfaction. And from these life forms that went through the terror of war, he managed to extract more energy than any other dimension could produce. He decided to name himself the Demon King to continue managing that dimension. Our protagonist dislikes the way some constellations view life. It only makes him more irritated. He decided he would eliminate that enemy no matter the cost. The constellation of war doubted the human was capable of anything like that. But our boy had received a reward for overcoming the challenge of the constellation of wrath. He reached the second level of his ascension. His hair is now blue, and we all know blue is a powerful color. Now he can use a divine ability, and seeing what was unfolding, Justice said that power was too much. But it was too late. The divine judgment had already begun. Several winged beings were created by the protagonist. They flew toward the constellation like bolts of lightning, and the entity managed to create a shield to defend itself, preventing the attack from reaching his body, recognizing it as an extremely powerful light attribute, leaving the pervert speechless. It was an impressive feat. Everything, except for the constellation, had been destroyed. Now the weapon that had turned into a shield became a spear in the entity's hands. Rising from the throne, the Demon King said he had been waiting for the arrival of the prophecy hero. He was very intrigued when he heard about a human capable of defeating a constellation. Now that person stood before him. It was time to test his strength, when Justice asked him to stop, stating that they were currently undergoing the trial of the constellation of gastronomy and he could not interfere in it. And the constellation said he had no intention of getting in the way, since they were the ones who entered his domain. As she mentioned this matter, he remembered something and decided to put away his spear. The constellation of Fun had said something about it. He recalled that when they were all gathered, Fun said everyone was interested in the pervert. They all wanted to give him tests and challenges to collect the best ninjentropy. But no matter how strong he is, if they all attacked at once, he would end up being destroyed, along with humanity. That's why they need to be very fair. They would begin with the constellations that showed interest first and follow that order. He wasn't acting just because he had been first. He asked if anyone had any objections to his words. Faced with everyone's silence, he was very pleased that the decision had been unanimous. The constellation of war remembered that he ended up at the back of the line. His number is 389. Justice said they had only come there to gather ingredients from that dimension, which surprised the Demon King. As the master of that dimension, he could create any kind of thing. News that immediately shocked our protagonist. They said they needed lava sea urchins, and the demon asked how many they needed. The pervert said they needed a lot, and the constellation immediately began materializing the creatures in front of them. After doing so, he asked if they needed anything else. Our boy asked for dragon eggs and paradise rabbits, and a large number of those items began appearing in that place. All of it was so impressive that the pervert realized there are entities far more powerful than he had imagined. The constellation of war asked them to hurry up so they could undergo his trial soon. Our boy stood before him, deep in thought, and with a mischievous smile, he agreed with those words, saying that one day he would return so they could have a proper duel, and he was grateful for the Demon King's cooperation. As they left left that place, the constellation wished that he wouldn't die during the trials. Our protagonist only asked that he wait while thinking to himself how lucky he was. Back in the forest, he carefully observed the tree he had created. He was upset to have discovered something so delicious only now in his life. Everyone who tasted those petals agreed it had been worth living just to experience that moment. If it already tasted that good raw, it must be even better cooked. While they were all very emotional eating, someone called out to him. It was the second team who had managed to collect all the required items, even the rabbit that was wearing clothes. Talking to himself, our protagonist was impressed that he had been able to pull it off. The dragon wanted to know where he got all those eggs from, and for a brief moment, our protagonist celebrated by himself, performing a very specific handshake. He hadn't expected to actually gather all those ingredients. Now it was time to return to being one again. The dragon wasn't sure if the Demon King had really been defeated, and the old racist said he had always believed in him. After tasting that petal, Trap became extremely emotional, and the hero of the prophecy was being cheered by everyone. They believe he had managed to defeat the Demon King, something he actually plans to do very soon. Looking at all those ingredients, the warrior didn't know what to do with them. She looked at the old racist, who claimed not to know any recipes. He only knew the history of his people and racist remarks toward all races. Being the team's cook, a title she'd acquired at an inconvenient time, the warrior felt very pressured. The dragon suggested they meet the best chef in the city. He couldn't be sure, but the royal family's chef had already used all of those ingredients before. To justice, that made perfect sense, and the pervert liked the suggestion. It was time to seek out that chef, he said, while looking at the dragon, who felt intimidated, knowing he'd have to be the guide once again. Flying on the creature's back while carrying the ingredients they'd acquired, they headed toward the next city. The pervert was excited to arrive at the royal palace. Inside the city, life went on as usual, until a man decided to look up at the sky. He didn't know birds could get that big. The strangest part was that, without any sign of technology, a little boy said it was an airplane. His father told him those kinds of things only existed in legends, not noticing the dragon approaching. That's when the panic had already spread through the city. This wasn't a plane, and it wasn't a bird either. The enormous dragon landed before them, carrying its crew on its back. Answering the people's confusion, the pervert said it was a super dragon. After getting off the creature, he asked if the city was the capital of the country. It really looked like another world. And the dragon said from this point on, they were on their own, as he didn't wish to meet the king of that nation. He warned that the hero should also be cautious. He was about to say something about the king's nature. But remember that the hero didn't like spoilers, and the warrior noticed he really took that into account. In any case, the dragon said they'd understand once they met him. And because of all the help they received, the pervert thanked him and hoped to meet him again in the future. The dragon assured him it was an honor to have helped the hero of the prophecy, saying they would certainly meet again. Looking at the man and his son, the pervert asked if they could borrow that wheelbarrow. So they continued their journey, carrying all of their belongings. The hamburger announced the hero's arrival in that city, embarrassing the girls to death. The assassin noticed everyone was looking at them, but she didn't realize the true reason why they were staring at her. Until, after causing all that commotion, a group of people caught their attention. They were classic bandits demanding that the hero's group hand over everything they had. Hidnara recognized it as a stereotypical event where a group of bandits decides to hassle the hero's party. Seeing they were distracted, the bandit resumed his threats, saying he would take their lives as well. The bald one in the group was stunned by the assassin's beauty, while the dumbest among them said he liked that very unique woman in the group. Trap began releasing her murderous intent, terrifying everyone in the area. The pervert only asked that no lives be lost. Tired of being ignored, the bandit was about to say something but didn't notice the attack coming his way. He and his gang were completely defeated by Trap, who tore through them, leaving behind a trail of pain. She's already tired of this life, thinking about giving up and reincarnating soon. The citizens who witnessed it were amazed, seeing how quickly the bandits had been defeated. One of them said he saw those people riding a dragon and that the hero of the prophecy was there. After that great feat, the people acknowledged them as the heroes of the prophecy. Now the pervert could truly do as he pleased, scattering petals from the world tree throughout the city, being even more praised by the townsfolk. It didn't take long for the news to reach the royal castle. The informant stood before His Majesty, reporting that his self-proclaimed hero, the prophecy, was demanding an audience with him. Seated on his throne, the king was too absorbed in eating. He said their request was ridiculous, and that the hero should be sent away. The messenger said the hero's group had brought with him 4 of the greatest delicacies in the world. At last, the king gave more than just his curiosity, he also showed real interest. If it were true, the group should be brought before him immediately. Once inside the hall, the pervert asked for permission to enter. Hiding his own intentions, the king asked what brought them to that place. The pervert said he wanted to request the help of the royal chef. The royalty agreed but wanted something in return. All of the delicacies they had brought were to be handed over. The pervert hadn't expected such a demand and said it would be very difficult to fulfill. For refusing the king's command, he called for his guards, and the advisor tried to say that this was the hero's group. But consumed by greed, he ordered the advisor to remain silent. The guards were already in position to carry out the king's order. The men were to be killed and the women made as slaves. Loyal to the crown, the guards were ready to engage in combat. Now the pervert understood why the streets were filled with poverty. This country was a complete mess. He immediately turned to Trap, asking her not to kill anyone. Feeling she could make them suffer a lot, she actually liked the restriction. The guards charged furiously at the hero's team, and unleashing her full power, Trap was ready to face them, while our protagonist said those guards had chosen the wrong person to serve. They tried to strike her with their swords, but were brutally crushed by the woman's power. The royal guard was sent flying through the air, and the king couldn't believe that his elite soldiers had been subdued so easily. After defeating them all, the pervert approached the king. Since things had come to this, maybe he should take the crown for himself, naming the human hamburger the new king of that country. The bald king was utterly humiliated, begging for his life, while the hamburger king bragged about his new power. Clearly, this joke was planned. A real hamburger. With the negotiations concluded, the pervert demanded the presence of the head chef. The former king ordered his servant to do as requested. Watching everything unfold, the pervert realized the situation was hopeless, until the messenger brought in a very frail man. That was the royal chef. Seeing the condition he was in, the pervert asked why he looked like that. The former king said he was lazy and came from poverty, which is why he looked that way. But he valued his skills greatly. No longer able to contain his anger, the royal advisors said that the pig who was king exploited the chef relentlessly, giving him no rest. Furious, the king turned to his advisor, calling him ungrateful. But the pervert had seen enough. He was disgusted with the former king. It was revolting, and the hamburger king passed sentence. That man was banished to another dimension. Without understanding what was happening, 2 portals opened above him, and that despicable existence was sent to the absolute void. He tried to beg for mercy, but the portal closed shortly after. The assassin said a lot had just happened, and the pervert added, it was all very fun. Now only one thing remained to be done. But the cook was extremely exhausted. He was clearly in no condition to work, and the future of humanity depended on this person. That poor servant of the crown was completely worn out. After waking up, he was terrified, thinking he would be punished by the king in some way. That's when the pervert began calming him, assuring him there was no need to be afraid. But as if traumatized, the cook felt he needed to get back to work quickly. It would be a tragedy if the king grew hungry. The pervert told him not to worry, since the tyrant who ruled the country no longer existed. And that little hamburger on his shoulder was the new king of the entire nation. The cook was stunned to see a talking hamburger, and the new king already had his first orders, commanding the cook to make something delicious with the ingredients they had gathered. He could hardly believe his eyes, seeing that the rabbits, thought to be extinct, were right there. And that cart was also full of the greatest delicacies in the world. The pervert asked the cook to make something using all of it. For a brief moment he hesitated, but the warrior would assist him in the kitchen, and the illustrator chose a fitting image to show she knew how to wear an apron. The two were ready to face this great battle. The onions were being chopped like subdued enemies begging for mercy. The sauce with the sea urchins was being prepared as well. According to someone who had eaten it before, that's not how it's usually done. The cook also processed the rabbit legs, but the warrior felt sorry for those cute creatures. To use the dragon egg, they needed to break through its shell, which, once cracked, revealed it to be a normal egg like any other. They were working hard in that kitchen, but the result of their efforts seemed to be something truly remarkable. They already felt fulfilled. Finally, the food preparation was complete. In another room, the protagonist group was playing poker. The cook brought them a sample of what he had made. And one thing was certain, this was the most delicious recipe on the entire planet. Its mere appearance left the new king and the pervert speechless. It was simply an omelet, completely ordinary. The petals were sauteed over fire, the rabbit meat was grilled, and it was all wrapped inside an omelet made from the dragon egg, bathed in sea urchin sauce. The smell was truly mouth-watering, though Nero was afraid to try it. The warrior had tasted a bit while cooking, revealing the flavor was truly divine. Now it was time for the others to approve it as well. Trap and the pervert were already prepared to savor the omelet. The first bite was placed into the protagonist's mouth. He was immediately shocked by the explosion of flavors. It felt as if he had been dead this whole time without knowing, discovering the gift of life only after tasting that. His body was transported to other dimensions, and there he accessed the true reason we all exist. The meaning of life was revealed to that boy through taste. After such a sublime and beautiful experience, all he could do was cry, overwhelmed with emotion for having touched paradise with his palate. It felt like he was in the beautiful Elysian fields, awaiting the glorious eternity ahead, a flavor both comforting and enlightening. Such was the beauty of that experience that he forgot he even existed, because life was simply too beautiful. An ineffable experience, translated to him only through that dish. Once again, the boy was moved, because during his journey through that flavor, he encountered a magnificent entity. She took him in her arms like a child, sharing with the young man her immense love. All of this happened while he savored the omelet. The pervert truly had an experience, recognizing that it was perfectly delicious. Nara also acknowledged that it was divine. Everyone who had tasted the omelet was satisfied. All that remained was to thank the cook, who managed to prepare it all. The pervert was finally ready to face the challenge of that constellation. The cook was also very grateful that those people had saved his nation, and he hoped the hero's team could overcome the challenge. After all this work, the pervert gently put the cook to sleep, asking if everyone was ready to return. Since now they were going to face the challenge of the constellation of gastronomy, the sister, realizing they were ready, would send them to that constellation's dimension. The pervert is counting on the warrior's culinary skills. That after this entire journey, they are feeling much more confident. They set out toward the challenge, while a mysterious man watches the cook sleeping on the floor. The hero's group was sent to a dark dimension, and they can't see anything at all. The warrior began to feel afraid, and our protagonist used an illumination ability. The one impressed by this is the constellation, who noticed how fast they had been, and she is eager to taste the food they prepared, acknowledging that it would be far too predictable. Following the advice of the constellation of fun, she prepared something different, surprising everyone on the hero's team. They would be subjected to a cooking competition. For a moment, they don't understand the circumstances, while the depraved one gets upset with the constellation of fun. The entity in front of them asked if they still remember the conditions of the challenge. They must prepare a recipe that satisfies her, and they need to gather the ingredients and cook it themselves. These conditions are impossible to change. Before she could continue speaking, she transported other people to that place. Each of them is a representative of their own dimension and will present high-quality dishes of their own. If the protagonist's recipe isn't among the best, she will not feel satisfied. Nara said that this is very unfair. She is changing the rules, but the depraved one had already expected something like this because it would be fun, assuring her that they would prepare the most delicious dish on the planet. And the constellation revealed that she had already been watching a particular chef, pointing to a man who was sleeping in that kitchen with a rabbit on his head. Knowing that this is the chef who cooked the dish for them, they grew worried, since he had the ingredients they were going to use. Facing this difficulty, the depraved one asked the system where the ingredients they brought were. Now the warrior doesn't know what they'll do either, since that cook is truly formidable. A dish that looked like fish jelly was presented as very important at a clam meeting of that chef. He said it becomes even more delicious when accompanied by earth jelly, and the constellation is about to approve it. She tastes the dish without any prejudice, saying it was truly delicious to the surprise of the one who made it. Only then does she give her critique, saying it wasn't cooked to the proper point. Since the cook failed the challenge, he was extinguished. It's time to try the next dish, and after that harsh sanction, the other cooks became fearful. The Hamburger King realized that the punishment is really too severe, and the cook who had aligned with the hero's team started apologizing. The constellation said they could not share ingredients under any circumstance, which left the protagonist outraged. Nara said those ingredients were gathered by them, and the cook acknowledged this, lamenting not being able to repay that kindness. He greatly regretted that things were unfolding that way. The depraved one knows they need to think of a strategy as they were placed in this situation by the constellation, and he decided what he was going to say to her, while she was busy exterminating another cook. After their ingredients were removed, the depraved one said there was nothing they could do, and the entity asked if they weren't prepared. Granting them a little more time to gather the necessary ingredients, the depraved one thought it was a tasteless joke. Meanwhile, the constellation of gastronomy said she would try their dish once it was complete, and Justice had to calm the protagonist down. The warrior suggested summoning the ingredients again, but the constellation would only accept what was collected in person. Summoning or copying ingredients with magic is cheating. This makes each attempt by the group increasingly impossible, and they need to come up with something to do. Nara suggested using the time reversal ability, and the depraved one confirmed that constellations are immune to that kind of thing. That's when a wild idea came to his mind. He managed to glimpse the path to victory, revealing to his team that he had an idea, while the constellation of gastronomy continued tasting dishes. Travado said it's good to power through things sometimes, and that it's very fun to overcome obstacles with risky moves. Turning to Justice, he said he had a question for her. The dish that the constellation of gastronomy was about to try now was made of minerals. She didn't even put it in her mouth, she simply annihilated the cook. As time goes by, more creatures are being extinguished. All those cooks seem to have no hope whatsoever, since none of their creations managed to please the palate of the entity, who began to feel disappointed with them. Quite enthusiastic, she saw that the special chef had prepared his dish. She wonders what kind of recipe it is, presuming it was made with dragon eggs, and the chef said it's the most delicious omelet in the world. A very confident statement, she acknowledged. He said he was only able to prepare that dish because of the hero group's efforts. The woman immediately tasted the omelet. For a moment, her face was overtaken by an unreadable expression, until she revealed that it was truly perfect. Acknowledging that the name of the recipe suited it well, it really is the most delicious dish on the planet, saying that the chef is a strong contender for victory. The others who were still cooking became desperate. The constellation continued praising the quality of the recipe, asking where he got those ingredients. That's when, filled with courage, the chef gave up on continuing the competition. He didn't gather the ingredients by himself, and he couldn't go on with his conscience like that. Trying to intimidate him, the constellation asked if he would like to be extinguished. That's when the depraved one intervened, saying those ingredients were hers. And no matter what happens, he and his team are going to win this competition. An excess of confidence that frightened the hamburger. The cook was left speechless, while the constellation seemed increasingly intrigued. To her, it made no sense to exterminate a chef so talented. After several hours of competition, only 8 remained out of the original 100 candidates, but there was still one last team. The representatives of humanity had not yet been tested. Approaching them, the constellation asked what happened, since they hadn't even started cooking. The depraved one said they had done everything she asked, every single restriction, and now they had their own conditions to present. The constellation assumed it must be a bluff. If they were afraid of being extinguished, she was deeply disappointed. That's when the depraved one suddenly asked if she really was the constellation of cuisine, and he asked whether she was truly prepared and qualified to taste flavorful food. The woman said that was the very reason for her existence, wanting to know if the boy was doubting her. She said extinction wasn't a proper punishment for him, a harsher lesson needed to be taught, declaring she would hunt down humanity, cook them all, and devour them until they were extinct. Justice was already scared, realizing the depraved one's plan was far too bold, and he said there was one condition for her to be allowed to taste the dish they had prepared. That woman would have to relinquish her status as a constellation and become human. She immediately found that deeply offensive, but the depraved one confirmed it with justice. Constellations can voluntarily give up their status. These immortal beings are incapable of understanding the essence of food. Nature can be very cruel, and tasty rabbits are preyed upon by any creature larger than them. And the depraved one said she could only taste that dish and feel all of its flavors if she were human, since that was the very taste of life. This proposal made his team extremely uneasy, while the constellation of gastronomy began to smile in a threatening way, agreeing to submit to that, since she had been challenged on whether she truly understands the essence of a meal. She would become human for a brief moment, but the conditions of the challenge would remain unchanged. And if he tried to attack her while she was in that state, she would consider it interference in the challenge, which would be immediately ended. Since the constellation of justice was present, it would be her duty to pass a fair judgment. The constellation of gastronomy was extremely confident, and the warrior asked the depraved one if it was really okay to proceed this way. But this was the chance he had been waiting for. The woman was saying farewell to her divine powers, confirming that she would remain human for a brief moment. That's when the boy approached her, saying she looked exhausted. He used that moment to reverse time, leaving the constellation confused. That ability wouldn't have had any effect, since she was a constellation. But now that she had given up her powers, there was nothing preventing her from being affected by that ability. The depraved one's plan was being carried out in bold fashion. After that, they went into the forest, and the constellation asked where she was being taken, to which the depraved one replied that she would soon understand. Seeing the dragon approaching on the horizon, and it finally arrived. The powerful creature landed before them in a threatening manner, making the woman feel genuine fear. The depraved one called the creature by name, Dikasos, which confused her, as she had no idea how that human knew its name. Nara also realized that they had indeed gone back in time. Speaking to the dragon, the depraved one asked him to transform into a human quickly because the hero of the prophecy had arrived, while the constellation remained frightened in her new state. Justice assured her that no harm would come to her, which was confirmed by the depraved one. He would not let that happen, and he asked if she was truly willing to do anything for good food. Being the constellation of gastronomy, she assured them she was willing, genuinely interested in discovering human cuisine. In a deeply threatening tone, our protagonist asked her to trust him completely, while thinking to himself that she was going to regret this. The constellation was lying on the ground, visibly tired and distressed. She was doing some sit-ups but had no idea what the purpose of that exercise was. The depraved one told her to pay attention to her attitude, while the dragon was leading her training. The warrior said she had never done military service, and that they should be grateful to the soldiers who protect the country while they stand there talking. She didn't understand what that had to do with cooking or why she had to do all these tasks. That's when the depraved one asked if she was trying to question his orders. It didn't take long for the constellation to deeply regret her decisions, so she continued doing various physical exercises which pushed her to her limit. As she no longer had the strength to stand, she let her body rest quietly on the ground. The depraved one approached her immediately, asking if she had woken up, and the constellation guaranteed that if the food wasn't good, he was already dead and didn't know it. Seeing that she was now much more energetic, it was time to resume training. The woman immediately recognized that magic and asked him to wait, but her request was ignored. This time she was hanging from a rope. The only thing keeping her in place was the strength of her own hands. She was hanging from the world tree and once again couldn't make sense of the situation. The depraved one ordered her to climb and gather the flowers from that tree. The constellation just didn't understand why she had to do that task. It was very dangerous. If she fell, she would almost certainly lose her life. Trying to reassure her, Justice said that wouldn't happen, because they would find a way to save her. The warrior thought this was too much for that constellation, but Trap disagreed. That woman had tried to wipe them out, and seeing her suffer was deeply satisfying. Meanwhile, the constellation kept struggling to climb the rope, and the depraved one realized it would take her an entire day to reach the top. After much effort, the woman managed to get her hands on one of those flowers. Upon tasting it immediately, she realized it was far more delicious than she had imagined. Finally, after all the suffering she had endured, she experienced a moment of pleasure. But the flower was quickly taken from her hands. It would be needed for the dish they were going to prepare. The constellation swore she would kill them, but Justice made a point to remind her of the rules. Threatening participants was forbidden. The depraved one confirmed there was still work to be done, and the constellation started wondering when they were actually going to cook. In the Demon King's castle, thunder rumbled through the sky, and a loud laugh echoed across the entire place. The constellation of war saw what was being done to the constellation of gastronomy and found her situation hilarious. She had become human. As soon as she saw the man sitting on the throne, she wondered what the constellation of war was doing in that place, and the depraved one told her to bow and ask politely. That was something she didn't want to do, and the depraved one reminded her about the ingredients which belonged to that individual. The constellation of war wanted this challenge to end quickly so he would start having fun. Quite frightened, the constellation of gastronomy asked him for the ingredients, which were immediately handed over to them. Now our protagonists said they had everything necessary for the recipe. It was time to make that wonderful dish. That statement brought joy to the constellation. Only then did she realize that feeling. She was excited to taste that recipe again. While the depraved one was eager to speed up this episode, disappearing from the war constellation's hall, who, once left alone in his castle, realized he was already quite bored with nothing to do. All of them had gone to the royal palace. The depraved one hadn't expected to meet that king again. having to defeat his guards once more. The fool begged to be spared and sought his crown on the head of that hamburger, a small paradox. Continuing the story, the tyrant was banished to the void. The rest of the task would be a responsibility of the team's warrior, who was an excellent cook, but the constellation appeared distraught. The warrior had noticed her reaction. As soon as they arrived at the kitchen, they found the cook napping. Just like last time, he was completely drained from his work. Carefully stepping past him, the warrior said she would need to use that kitchen. While waiting for the dish, the constellation of gastronomy said she was starving and didn't understand why they were playing around. At last, the recipe had been completed, and the constellation couldn't hide her anticipation. Trying to compose herself briefly, she said she would judge the dish as a human, but needed to be dressed appropriately. After going through all that suffering, she guaranteed that if it wasn't delicious, they would regret it. For a brief moment, the warrior felt intimidated, and the constellation asked what dish it was. Before answering, she gently presented the dish. It was a new recipe, the best lasagna on the planet. She thought the combination of ingredients would be perfect for a lasagna, but the constellation of gastronomy couldn't hear anything. Her hunger was louder. The explanation continued, but for the first time in her entire existence, the constellation was being driven by extreme hunger. She was already ready to taste it, and the warrior realized that the best dish to be made was one that would satisfy that hunger. Finally, she tasted the first bite, which caused a huge reaction throughout her body. Tears immediately began to fall down her face. That constellation didn't even know what to say as she felt that flavor. While she ate, overwhelmed with emotion, the cook woke up and witnessed the scene. He immediately fell in love with the woman he had just met. The depraved one asked what she thought of the taste. She said she felt regret. Her time alive as a constellation was meaningless compared to that completely new flavor. It had the same ingredients as the omelet she had tried before, but the experience was entirely different. Recognizing that she finally understood what a true meal was, there was no denying that truth, and the warrior asked what had happened to the challenge. The constellation's answer was encouraging. They had been completely approved. Upon receiving that good news, they immediately began to celebrate. The warrior asked if the depraved one already knew that this result would be achieved, revealing to her that it was a gamble, but he had been thinking about which development would be most interesting and tried to create the best flow possible. She definitely didn't understand that when Nara appeared saying it was only possible thanks to her. The depraved one agreed with that statement, saying the lasagna he ate at her house was delicious. The skill she had in the kitchen was essential for the depraved one to believe in that strategy, and he thanked the warrior for her contribution. The compliment made her very shy, and the depraved one noticed something else. For having overcome that challenge, the system granted him another reward. He could now ascend to stage 3. But even using that ability, he still lost his battles. Frustrated, the system told him he could manage on his own, but the boy insisted on returning the reward, telling the hamburger that there is nothing more important than becoming stronger and stronger. It's still impossible for him to fight on equal footing with the constellations, but he doesn't want to go through these trials forever. The constellation of gastronomy ate everything that was presented to her, leaving the cook very pleased. He asked her if she was still hungry, and trying to deny her desires, she said she could eat a little more. That's when the head chef made his appearance, asking if he could make her a dessert because he had never seen someone enjoy a meal like that woman. And as a chef, he was deeply charmed by that behavior. The constellation immediately accepted the gesture, and the depraved one realized what was happening. Justice said her fellow constellation had worked hard and wanted to know if she would report all of this to their king. Before answering, she looked at the cook once again, saying she would remain silent. She would stay in that dimension as a human. Justice became concerned, saying the challenge had ended and she needed to return to her position as a constellation. But the woman was reflecting on it. She wanted to relearn the meaning of cooking. Justice said that if she remained mortal, the balance of the universe could be compromised. But the constellation of gastronomy was already decided, and she went over to the warrior to say something to her, handing the girl her artifacts, completely pristine cutlery. The warrior didn't know if she could accept such a treasure, and the constellation said it was simply a gesture of her gratitude. The girl didn't know what to do with it, and the depraved one realized things had become much more interesting. Justice noticed that the constellation of wrath had disappeared and the constellation of gastronomy had abandoned her post. The human she was supervising was causing major disturbances in the universe. The warrior didn't know how to use those artifacts, so she divided them among her companions, giving the knife to the assassin, who immediately began thinking wicked thoughts. All that remained for her was the golden spoon. The depraved one recommended she keep it, so she could grow stronger. The hamburger had jumped off the protagonist's shoulder and was approaching the constellation of gastronomy. He gently removed the crown from his own head, saying that if she were going to stay in that place, then she should become the queen of that people. She must have definitely wanted to eat the hamburger while she was training, but she held herself back, and he respects that attitude. But she insisted that she is the constellation of gastronomy. She would never eat just anything. Even so, she was very thankful for the hamburger's gift, though his pride had been brutally shattered. If she assumes a leadership role in the constellation of war's dimension, she's certain she'll learn a lot. After hearing that, the depraved one was sure she didn't know that constellation either. He believes another challenge will soon happen. They've already gone through 2 so far. Nara noticed that in each challenge, the genre of the story changes. The protagonist agreed with that. He hadn't realized it before and wondered if the author never gets tired of his work. Until Justice announced there would be no more challenges, as she would try to persuade the Constellation Council, asking for everyone to return to their normal lives. The warrior asked if that meant they wouldn't be dragged into these dangerous adventures anymore. That's when Fun appeared, saying that would be very difficult. His presence in that place surprised everyone, saying that the next constellation was already waiting, and he would take them them to her immediately. Justice tried to ask him to stop, and Fun said the next one was a zodiac constellation and they'd be quick about it. They were instantly transported from that dimension, leaving behind the cook and the constellation of astronomy. Our protagonist found himself in the middle of a very rainy and cloudy place, getting upset because Fun had abandoned them in a place like that and vanished. Using one of his abilities to protect himself from the rain, he asked if everyone was okay, but the rain had soaked them all. Looking more closely at that place, he realized it was disgusting and began to wonder which constellation lived there. That's when Trap said she felt a massive killing intent, something she hadn't sensed in the other constellations. And a mysterious voice replied that it wasn't that intense. A woman was emerging from a puddle of water, saying that for them to overcome her challenge was simply impossible, finally revealing herself to them, revealing she belonged to the constellation of Scorpio. Justice immediately recognized that woman. She was also the constellation of Despair. The presence of that constellation significantly changed the gravity of the situation. Justice tried to approach her, saying it was impossible. Those people couldn't handle another challenge, but she was ignored. No matter what Justice tried to say to her, she was already decided on what she would do. The Constellation Assembly keeps saying that they must go through the challenges so that they become more powerful. That's why she couldn't wait any longer. The energy she could absorb from these lives was of high quality, and she wanted to consume it immediately, so she wouldn't give up on her challenge. That's when they noticed the swamp was getting more and more humid, and the water was rising. While the constellation wanted them to surrender to despair and not overcome her challenge, that was her condition. The depraved one said things wouldn't go the way she wanted, using his power to prevent them from being swallowed by the water. That caused a massive explosion, and the depraved one demanded the constellation pay attention. He asked what was wrong with these entities, who first create life and then want to end it. The depraved one definitely didn't like that kind of being, and was already able to use the third stage of his ascension. He even considered turning her into an ally, since the design assigned to her by the illustrator was very good. But that idea was quickly discarded. The constellation seemed to show complete disregard for life. Before he could use his signature finger attack, the constellation stopped it with one of her hands, saying it was impossible. She wouldn't allow something that dangerous to happen within her domain. That's when the depraved one realized she possessed great power and speed. Those belonging to the Zodiac were far stronger. On a completely different level from the Herald of Wrath, if that constellation truly wanted to kill him, there was little to nothing the protagonist could do. Even so, he decided he would use his tools, and the Constellation of Despair recognized the artifact that once belonged to Wrath, that greatly enhanced the protagonist's power. He finally managed to hit her with one of his strikes, forcing the constellation to defend herself. The fury in that blow was loaded with an extremely destructive and furious energy, marking the planet's atmosphere with devastation. Now that he was in Stage 3, he could control that artifact, not being consumed by rage. Fallen to the ground, Despair said it was impossible. A human wasn't supposed to have that kind of power. Very determined, the depraved one began to believe he could win this fight, moving toward that constellation determined to end everything that way. That was when his attack was stopped by the presence of Justice, who said he couldn't handle things like that. The depraved asked her to step aside. If she kept interfering like that, she'd be labeled a boring character and her popularity would drop significantly. But Justice insisted she was trying to protect him and humanity, because if things continued like that, the Council of Constellations would eliminate them all. But those words weren't enough to change the depraved's mind. After receiving that blow, Despair stood up, saying it was impossible. Humanity could not escape extinction, because that was the decision she had made. Those words deeply frightened the protagonist's team, who feared humanity was approaching its end. And looking toward the horizon, they saw a massive wave of water approaching like a tsunami. The size of that body of water was truly overwhelming, and the constellation said they would drown in the swamp of despair, experiencing the worst kind of hopelessness. The depraved realized his companions were in serious danger. He needed to use a magic barrier. Before he could cast it, he was caught off guard by Despair, who attacked him while asking the boy to give up. Justice tried to calm everyone, asking them to listen to her guidance. Thanks to that constellation's authority, while they were in this swamp, they would be trapped in an illusion of their deepest suffering. Experiencing every kind of agony, one after the other, they must not give in to despair. If they could endure it all to the end, he would surely escape this place. Justice then spoke to the Constellation of Despair, saying the humans she had met were remarkable beings. Even though they could alter the order of the universe, their wisdom and willpower were astonishing. They were not as weak as she believed, and they were capable of overcoming this challenge. Justice believed they would all be perfectly fine, and as she finished her speech, the wave was already upon them. She said the most important thing was not to let it break them, and the swamp was immediately swept away by all that water. The depraved tried to defend himself with a magic barrier, but he was quickly reached by Justice, who held him in her arms, saying that all of his companions would be fine. He needed to stop fighting the swamp to look despair in the eyes. Only then could he overcome it. Looking around, he was able to see all of his companions. The depraved said he would leave them in Justice's care. She asked him not to worry, as she would protect all of their bodies. As soon as he removed his barrier, the protagonist was swallowed by despair. His consciousness was sinking into a bottomless lake, sinking faster and faster, until he was taken to another place, completely unconscious. The voice he heard was familiar, a man saying he had already asked him to go buy bread, but the boy kept sleeping. Then he grabbed him by the head and slammed his face into the floor. The depraved woke up not knowing where he was, saying his head hurt, and the man asked if the idiot hadn't woken up yet. Now he needed to come with him. That was his classroom, but the depraved didn't feel like he had traveled back in time. He finally concluded that maybe this was the despair scenario Justice had talked about. The man beside him kept threatening him, and the depraved realized that was his former self, the one who suffered in school. So he began to wonder what the purpose of all this was, because he didn't really know what he was supposed to do in that situation. But he decided he would live through the illusion, believing he still had all the powers he had received. Things didn't go the way the depraved had imagined. He swore he would have a satisfying moment where he'd teach that delinquent a good lesson. But in the end, all he got was a massive beating, completely one-sided. He even tried using some of his abilities, trying to freeze the bully. But nothing happened, and he remained a complete fool, which only made the guy even angrier. None of his attempts worked. The depraved didn't even have any of his usual amulets or any abilities. The only thing he could do was keep getting beaten without being able to fight back. There was only one thing in that situation: despair. While being beaten, he had to endure that jerk's comments, who said that if he didn't do what he was told, he'd get beaten even more. The depraved grew thoughtful. Not long ago, he was able to blow up planets with a single finger. He believed this was all fictitious, happening only inside his mind, but he started to worry about the others who were probably facing similar situations. The depiction of that jerk wasn't nearly as cruel in real life. That's when the boy decided he needed to gather his strength and stand up. He wasn't going to give in to despair. He would take advantage of the opportunity now that the jerk had his back turned, using his newly acquired instincts as a hero capable of saving the Earth, charging at him furiously. He even managed to land a hit, but it was far less effective than he imagined. The result of his actions was only to further enrage that figure, who grabbed the depraved by the neck, a clear sign that the beating would not be gentle. The sound of the protagonist's body being pounded echoed through the air. His face was completely swollen, almost unrecognizable. If he could do anything right now, he would definitely turn that boy into a hamburger bun. Inside the classroom, he couldn't even access the system screen. If he kept taking hits like that, he'd give in to despair. The depraved realized he needed to learn how to fight. There was no way to do it alone. He needed someone to teach him. The first person who came to his mind was the warrior from his team, who had great athletic skills. Even if he didn't learn to fight, he could at least improve his athleticism. He planned to visit her during the break. As soon as he left the classroom, he noticed his nose was still bleeding, and in his current state, it was a bit embarrassing to talk to someone like that. Before he could speak to her, he saw the girl talking to the jerk. For a moment, he found that level of closeness strange. And the girl didn't seem to like it either, even if the jerk didn't catch the obvious. He kept insisting on getting closer to her, until the warrior pushed him away, telling him to stay away from her. The jerk was ready to be even more of a jerk, but the depraved was already very close to him, managing to jump on his back, clinging to him like a backpack, telling the jerk to disappear and stop bothering the girl because she was going out with him. Even the depraved didn't know why he said that. While they argued, the warrior watched the whole thing thoughtfully, surprised by his behavior. The jerk couldn't tolerate the depraved's behavior anymore. Saying he was asking to die that day, seeing that things might escalate, the warrior asked them to stop. But the jerk was ready to throw himself to the ground, slamming the depraved's body into the floor with all his strength, an impact strong enough to injure a regular person. A truly insane move. For those who care, Michael Chandler did something like that in the USC, but still lost the fight to the great Charles Du Bronx. After witnessing that violent act, the warrior asked the jerk if he wanted to end up in juvenile detention. He said that would never happen, because his father was very rich and could cover for him anytime it was needed. Lying on the floor, the depraved could barely move, realizing he couldn't escape despair through his own strength, and then he began hearing the degrading comments from those people. While the depraved just wanted peace, the jerk decided to attack him again. That's when the warrior managed to grab his hand, leaving the jerk speechless, and with firm words, the girl told him he'd better stop. He didn't seem to like seeing her defend that weirdo, but the warrior remained very angry, until he asked if there was something going on between the two of them, while holding her hand tightly. The girl wasn't going to tolerate that kind of abuse anymore, so she quickly grabbed the guy's hand, executing a well-planned circular movement, twisting his wrist enough to cause pain and make him drop to his knees. After he fell, she still managed to land several punches to his face. Meanwhile, the depraved remained on the ground, flirting with his own despair. Everything happened way too fast, and the jerk was completely taken down by the warrior. As soon as it was all over, the depraved began getting up from the floor, acknowledging that what had just happened before his eyes was truly incredible. Then the girl approached the weirdo. She asked if he was okay, because he had hit his occipital really hard on the floor. The boy didn't know what that word meant, and the warrior explained that he hit the back of his head, and she wanted to know if he was alright. Even though it hurt a bit, it didn't seem to be anything serious. She wanted to know why he got involved in all that. She could have handled it on her own. That's when the depraved asked if she knew how to fight. She said she had watched a lot of videos online about special forces and began preparing herself to become a soldier one day, something the depraved would never have imagined about her. The girl continued, saying that even if he seemed fine, hitting his head like that was always dangerous. Reaching out her hand to him, she asked if he could get up, because she was going to take him to the infirmary. After that kind gesture, the depraved reached out to her, and their fingers finally touched. That's when he realized what was really happening. That jerk had already gotten up, and he looked furious with the two of them. Furiously, he asked what kind of relationship they had with each other. Before they could answer, the jerk assured them that he wouldn't go easy on the girl just because she was a woman. He took his role as a jerk very seriously. That made the depraved worried. Even if none of this was real, he thought it was way too extreme for the jerk to try to hit his classmate. And that's exactly what was happening. The jerk seemed completely out of control, charging at a woman. But the warrior's eyes were filled with a coldness forged in battle. She wasn't afraid. That's when a voice called out down the hallway announcing that the teacher was arriving. It was just moments away from those two getting into a fight that could have become very serious. But after hearing about the teacher, the jerk remembered that he was also a coward, so he had to follow his own playbook. Before leaving, he made sure to say the depraved was going to get beaten up badly after school, spitting on the boy's head, which made the warrior even more upset, saying that besides being a jerk, that guy was disgusting. She couldn't understand how some people could be such jerks, while the depraved said he was okay. Since all of this was just a big virtual reality, nothing he was experiencing there was real. Just seeing that girl get upset over something related to him was already more than enough. A third person observed that unlikely pair with great interest, revealing a subtle smile on their face. They finally made it to the infirmary, and the depraved kept insisting that he was fine. He had, after all, made it there on foot. Maybe he really was okay, and his eyes didn't look so injured anymore. She had to get closer to be sure, which made the depraved a little anxious. She said he should stay there until the teacher arrived. So the depraved lay down on the bed, while the warrior sat beside him waiting for the teacher to show up. That's when he asked why she hadn't left yet. She said there was no one else to watch over him, and if he had a sudden reaction, it could be really bad. And she also didn't feel like going back to class. All that honesty just made her even cuter in the eyes of the depraved. Puva asked once again how she knew how to fight too. The warrior said she didn't want to get into pointless conversation with him. Knowing she didn't want to talk, the boy simply thanked her for the help, asking if she wanted to hear something interesting. The depraved and the little jerk had known each other since childhood, since the protagonist's father used to work for the jerk's father's company. When they were kids, they used to play together as if they were friends, until one day the depraved started to notice how different they were. That's when things started to happen naturally. One fine day, the depraved bumped into someone. He looked back, not understanding what had happened, only to be stared at by a group of juvenile delinquents, his childhood friend among them. But he did nothing about what happened. They had grown apart without even realizing it. Before becoming a loser in the other's eyes, the two had actually been friends, until the treatment he received from the jerk got worse and worse to the point of being unbearable. But the truth is, things didn't start off bad. That's when the warrior said she couldn't keep listening to that story, saying he was an idiot and that it was the protagonist's fault things ended up that way. He disagreed with those words. Some people are strong like her, while others are useless like him. The girl said that was nothing but foolish self-pity. If he wanted to try, he could change things. The depraved said she only talked like that because she didn't understand. His father's job was also tangled in that dynamic. That's why he felt he couldn't do anything about it. Once again, the girl just called him an idiot. She didn't believe that if his father saw the situation, he'd really think there was nothing to be done. Until she let out a deep sigh, realizing she had gone too far in that conversation. That's when our protagonist asked for her help. At first, the girl didn't understand, and he reminded her that she was the one who said things could change if he tried. So he decided to give it a shot, asking her to teach him how to fight like a man. A request that left the warrior quite surprised, but in a way, relieved. She asked if the boy really wanted to learn that. She could understand that he was interested in learning something. But before that conversation could finish, her eyes began to glow with an intense bluish light, and she answered no, leaving the protagonist confused. He began to feel another wave of despair, asking why that was happening. And the girl said she had no interest in doing anything in his company. That's when things began to change again. The bed he was lying on turned into a small swamp. He tried to break free from it, realizing he couldn't give up yet. Something had to be done about this situation. Anything that was possible. With great effort, the boy managed to stand up, supporting one of his arms on the bed frame, declaring to his friend that he liked her. Those words left her very confused, and she seemed to snap out of whatever state she was in. The depraved repeated it once more. He said he liked her, but he only had the courage to say it because he believed none of this was real. Now that things had come to this point, he decided he would bet all his chips. And the girl got even more irritated, saying the depraved was acting way too weird. Standing up, she said she regretted stepping into his problem with the jerk. Our protagonist was sinking deeper and deeper into that small swamp. Before she could leave the room, he shouted a magic word, lasagna. He said that was the dish she made best. Confused, the warrior asked how he knew that, and he continued listing things he knew about her, that when she was little she wanted to become a soldier, but also played baseball and could cook really well. The girl now thought he was a huge creep who stalked people, and the depraved could barely answer as he was sinking. He revealed that he was actually her boyfriend from the future, a very risky move, but the protagonist felt like he had nothing left to lose. Those words seemed to fry her ability to process. The girl wasn't able to say anything. She just left the room, and our protagonist sank completely into the bed, thinking he had definitely overdone it. The deeper he sank, the more he began to wonder if this was really the end, until a hand managed to pull him out of the water, bringing his body back to the surface, back to the bed. It was his friend, the warrior from his team, now wanting him to explain this whole situation better. She said she really had played baseball and enjoyed cooking. Now it was his turn to explain how he knew all that and what kind of nonsense that was about coming from the future. For a moment, the depraved had to think to understand what was going on. noticing that the girl's hand was still holding his tightly. She seemed embarrassed about the earlier confession. Seeing that their hands were still together, she got annoyed and punched the depraved in the face, but she was the one holding his hand. Just then, the nurse walked in. Seeing the two students there, she asked what they were doing, interrupting a very interesting beatdown session. Outside the school, she discovered that the part about being from the future and her boyfriend was a lie. But she also found out that they were companions who fought creatures from another dimension, and one of those creatures had trapped them in this virtual prison. Now she was sure he was a mentally unstable degenerate who needed treatment, and honestly, even he agreed that the story was complicated. And the weirdest thing of all, she didn't even seem to realize he was sinking into that bed. He then said he wouldn't bother her anymore, but that he really wanted to learn how to fight because he had problems with the jerk. She didn't want to waste her time teaching someone like the depraved, who once again said everything he had told her was true, except for the part about coming from the future. That's how he knew things about her personal life, saying he wouldn't lie to her anymore. And she remembered the moment when he confessed his feelings, wondering if that part was actually true. Besides that, the boy made her realize that the jerk had tried to hit her earlier. He couldn't ignore what had happened. He wouldn't let that guy provoke her again. Little by little, the girl began to feel more and more embarrassed by all these events. She said he might already be able to beat the jerk in a fight, because there's a clear weight class difference between them, and the jerk seems to understand the basics of martial arts. He knows how to throw a punch. A twig like the depraved isn't going to accomplish anything in a few hours. It's just ridiculous. Since he has no other option, the boy at least wants to try, especially because she was the one who encouraged him in the first place. If he works hard, he might be able to change things. She apparently doesn't remember saying those words, but the boy knows it happened in the previous chapter. Since she couldn't avoid the situation anymore, she agreed to help him, but said he wasn't going to win. After saying that, she calmly stepped closer to him, punching the depraved right in the mouth. The force of the impact knocked him to the ground, and the depraved asked why she did that. The girl said she needed to settle this before the fight started. It's necessary to create an opening and target a vital spot, she said, while motioning as if to crush the crown jewels with her foot. She said they would train that until class was over, and the depraved realized that was his only option. Finally, classes for the day came to an end. The poor depraved was completely exhausted. That girl's training was as tough as a constellation's trial. He was totally worn out, and someone approached him. It was the jerk calling the boy to follow him. The depraved already knew what was about to happen, but this time, he had a plan. He remembered what he had trained with her. The girl had asked him why he got hit. He said the answer was obvious. She attacked him suddenly with an elbow, and she said that was the point. He only got hit because he didn't expect an attack. If he could anticipate it, he could have dodged. The same would happen when he fought the jerk. The guy only thought about attacking. He certainly wouldn't expect to be hit first. The depraved needed to act like he was submissive and use the first opportunity to strike. And that's exactly what he was doing in front of the jerk, who was saying that everything he was about to do now was the depraved's fault. He shouldn't even try to blame him afterward. Then he began taking off his jacket. Completely distracted by that, our protagonist struck him right in the crown jewels, causing the worst kind of pain he could feel at that moment. The boy managed to find an opening and hit a vital point. Things were going according to plan, and the jerk fell to the ground, writhing in pain. While he cried, he kept threatening our protagonist even more. But the boy kept watching that scene, thinking he had acted like a coward. He told his friend that he didn't feel comfortable with that strategy, until she asked him if he was really an idiot or if he was trying hard to be one. He was clearly the weaker one in that fight, not to mention the victim in that whole situation. There was in fact a coward there, but it wasn't the depraved. Those words seemed to light up the boy's mind, who now looked at the jerk completely defenseless. He barely had the strength to stand. In his upbringing, the depraved had been taught that violence was never a solution, but he was learning that sometimes it's necessary. That experience felt too real, but he once again found comfort in the idea that this was all just fiction, saying he wouldn't let the jerk mess with him again, landing a clean punch to his face. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.